My godfather is the prince's own son. He's not only sworn brothers with the black and white imperishables, but also promised to get me a female ghost as a wife. But I'd never seen such a scene before. My legs went weak, and I cried out, I can't. He quickly covered my mouth and told me to be quiet, because I have an excess of yin and a deficiency of yang, making me easily possessed. If we woke her, we'd both be dead. After finally dragging the woman onto the boat, she and Dad said that if I didn't want to marry her, I should hurry up and find a place to bury her. After following my godfather to the cemetery, we found a feng shui spot for her, and we prepared to bury her. He first placed the woman into the dug grave. Then he lit 3 incense sticks on top of her head. The 3 incense sticks burned down at an incredibly fast speed. Xian Duo hurriedly pulled out some joss paper and said, "Rest in peace, little girl. Since my adopted son doesn't want to marry you, then I'll find you a good place to bury you and reincarnate soon." After saying that, he gestured for me to fill the grave. I thought that after burying her, I wouldn't have to marry her. But unexpectedly, she appeared on my bed in the middle of the night, and said that if I didn't want to marry her, I should quickly hide in the underground shelter. I was nearly scared to death by this eerie scene. I hurriedly called my godfather to see what was going on. But before my godfather could speak, the female corpse suddenly sat up straight, and blood started to seep from her eyes. The female corpse slowly moved closer to us. She even gestured for me to stay silent. Just as she was about to be face to face with me, she fell to her knees with a thud, a quick hit of opium. The woman, after taking the opium, turned and walked out. My foster father and I quickly followed. The direction the corpse disappeared to was my biological father's house. I threw open the door, only to be drenched in a bowl of blood. Seeing this, my foster father quickly called me over to the water jar. I washed the blood off my head. At this time, Xian Duo, looking completely bewildered, also came out. Xian Duo explained that someone had placed a bowl of crow's blood at my doorstep, asking my father if our family had any enemies. Father shook his head, saying we didn't have any enemies. He hadn't seen a woman run inside either. Hearing this, Godfather told me to go to sleep. He and my father had something to discuss. The next morning, I was woken by a noisy commotion outside. Pushing the door open, I saw that it was old Nyo from the village entrance. Old Nyo was covered in sweat, urging me to go to the river and take a look, because my father had drowned in the river. To save my life, they did a lot. The Yama King lent a yellow waistcoat that granted immunity from death. He said that wearing this would temporarily protect me from evil spirits. Although my father died in a strange way, I didn't dare to ask too many questions. I could only bow a few more times at his grave. Just as I was about to head home with my godfather, a figure suddenly appeared behind the tree. I quickly called my godfather to check it out. But when we got to the tree, the person was gone. When I got home, I stared at the empty room, feeling lost. That's when I heard a knock on the door. I thought it was my godfather coming to see me. The mysterious man next to my father's grave. He started by asking if I believed he was still alive. Though I was very surprised, a glimmer of hope rose in my heart. But during the day, the villagers and I had checked for any signs of breath. How could he possibly still be alive? Upon hearing this, the man smiled faintly. He told me that when I hear a hen crowing tomorrow morning, I should immediately go to dig up my father's grave. If my father asks whether it is day or night, I should tell him it is day. After hearing this, I almost died of fright. How could such a bizarre thing happen in this world? Before I could ask more, the man disappeared again without a trace. In order to save myself, I chose to believe his words. Not long after, sitting in the chair, I fell into a deep sleep. I don't know how much time passed, but a piercing cold woke me up. I looked up and saw that it was already midnight. At that moment, a harsh rooster crow echoed from outside. I rushed to the door and looked outside. It was a large rooster crowing. Just when I thought a man wanted me, a rooster crowed from the roof. The next second, a hen that flew down actually started crowing. Seeing this, I quickly grabbed my shovel and flashlight, intending to dig up my father's grave. After arriving at the grave and kowtowing to my father, I frantically dug with the shovel. I directly pried open his coffin lid. "Are you still alive?" After asking that question, I started crying. What am I doing? My father is already dead. How could he come back to life? Just as I turned to leave, a sound suddenly came from behind me. My drowned father actually sat up. Is it day or night now? My terrified response was that it was daytime. Although my father was alive, he was like a walking corpse. He just kept asking whether it was day or night. He also said that if I didn't go to the shelter, I should go home with him and lie down for a while. Watching my father limp and stumble towards home, I had no choice but to follow behind him, too scared to speak. Once we got home, my father immediately lay down on the bed and fell asleep. With a heavy heart, I went over and touched him. Dad's body is warm. I really lived through it. Seeing this, I quickly set the alarm. The next day, I got up early and made breakfast for Dad. At this time, Godfather also arrived at my house. I excitedly told him that Dad lived. He's lying in bed, sleeping. Godfather, with a look of surprise, entered the bedroom. After feeling my extra pulse, he was shocked and said the man really came back to life. Excited, I shouted for my father to wake up and eat. But my godfather, with a grim face, told me, "Xiao Huai, don't call him. This is a trap. If we wake him up now, who knows what might happen. Although he's alive, his soul hasn't returned yet." He had to go to the underworld and ask the Earth God for a clear explanation. Having said that, Gon Duo turned and went into the inner room, leaving me alone to replay the whole event in my mind. A moment later, Gon Dai came over wearing a Taoist robe and holding a red string. He said he was going to help my father's soul return. I saw him first burn some paper money in the brazier. Then he tied one end of the red string to his own hand. After the paper money in the brazier had burned to ashes, Xiandai picked up the other end of the red string and said to me, "Huai'er, in a moment, tie the red string around your wrist. If you notice anything wrong with me, pull it back immediately." After I nodded in agreement, Gando sat cross-legged in front of the brazier and began chanting. Accompanied by a gust of cold wind, his body emitted a faint green light. Large drops of sweat also streamed down his face. It looks like I've already arrived in the underworld. At that moment, the red string on my wrist trembled. The next second, a powerful force yanked me forward. I used all my strength to barely steady myself, but it felt like something inside me was being drawn away. I looked down and found that it was my soul. It turns out the red string was pulling my soul away. I watched as my soul moved farther away, but I was powerless. Then a large hand suddenly clapped on my back. My soul actually returned, and my body was instantly filled with strength. I turned my head to find that the person who patted me was the mysterious man who had sent me to dig up my father's grave. Although my soul returned, the opposing force was still very strong. At this rate, I still won't be able to pull the dry wood back. Seeing this, the man told me to close my eyes. He said that in a moment, he would let me see who was really in front of me. A flash of golden light passed in front of my eyes. I opened my eyes and looked. To my surprise, the ones I was facing were 3 little ghosts. The little ghosts said that if they didn't take my soul today, they would never give up. Helpless, I had no choice but to seek help from the gods. The immortal comforted me, telling me not to panic. "You little imps, scram." But they were used to being arrogant and domineering, and wouldn't let go easily. One of them lunged at the immortal. Although the immortal remained perfectly still, a golden fist appeared out of nowhere, knocking the imp away. Seeing this, the remaining 2 imps pounced together, but I could never get close to the immortal. In the end, I could only mutter, "Just you wait." Then I slunk back to the underworld. Seeing the little ghost was gone, I immediately started pulling the ropes from my godfather. With a loud yell, Xian Duo was finally saved. He hung his head and mumbled, "I'm afraid the extra soul of yours may never come back." I quickly asked my father what had happened. He barely lifted his head and was about to speak, but suddenly froze in place. His pupils shook. "Why are you here?" "Since I'm here, you don't need to worry about this anymore." Hearing this, Mei responded with a "good." Then, she shakily stood up and said to me, "Xiao Huai, since he's here, I'm no longer needed. He has the ability to retrieve your lost soul." Watching her limp and hobble out of the house, I was filled with doubt. Just who was this man? It's impressive that you've earned such respect from your godfather. Do you want to save your father? Of course I do. But who exactly are you, and why do you want to help me? The man slowly walked to my father's bedside and whispered, "My name is Zhang Yiqing. You don't need to know more." With that, Zhang Yiqing's fingers began to glow with a faint golden light. With a snap, it was pressed against my father's temple, accompanied by the gathering of golden light. My father's complexion indeed turned rosy. The next moment, my father opened his bloodshot eyes and let out a fierce roar. To my surprise, the golden energy was actually expelled by him. Seeing this, Zhang Yiqing was puzzled and said, "Strange. Your father's soul isn't even in the underworld." I was greatly shocked upon hearing this. Where else could my father's soul go if not to the underworld? Zhang Yiqing just turned around without answering. He said the timing wasn't right yet. We must wait for a major event to occur. Then he disappeared again without a trace. I was filled with mixed emotions. In the blink of an eye, 5 days had passed. However, a strange thing happened in the village. The Qintai River, which had flowed continuously for hundreds of years, suddenly dried up. Could this be the big event he was talking about? While I was still puzzled, Zhang Yiqing found me. "Qin Bei, are you ready? Let's go find your father's soul now." Hearing this, I immediately perked up. Could he really know where my father's soul is? Although Zhang Yiqing agreed to help my father find his soul, I had to agree to one condition. Even though I didn't know what the condition was, I still agreed to it in order to save my father. Right after that, we left the village and walked from the afternoon until evening. We didn't stop until we reached the Qintai River. Looking at the dry riverbed of the Qintai River, I was in shock. This is the first time I've ever seen a river run dry overnight. Zhang Yiqing pointed to a puddle in the distance and said, "Go there." Could it be that what I'm missing is hidden there? He slowly knelt down. With just a touch of his hand, waves surged up from the unremarkable puddle. Seeing this, I asked, was my father killed by a water ghost? Zhang Yiqing, with a serious expression, gave a faint smile. You seem to know quite a lot. If I asked you to go down and fetch a soul, would you dare? I gritted my teeth and shouted, I dare. Good boy. Then I'll help you out. But before you go down, I need to ask the people inside if they agree. Having said that, he pulled out 3 incense sticks from his bosom. With a wave of his hand, he lit all 3. Then, with a whoosh, he threw them into the puddle. The next second, I was shocked by what I saw, because the 3 incense sticks were actually standing upright in the water. Immediately afterwards, a large hand slapped out from under the water, pulling the 3 incense sticks underwater. With this order, summon the soul quickly. Get it out. A wave of water, 3 or 4 meters high, surged into the sky upon impact. Moments later, it transformed into the figure of a man. But this wasn't him. I anxiously asked Zhang Yiqing what to do. He simply waved his hand, and pressed the man's soul back down. I turned around and asked what my father's name was. I told him my father's name was Qin Yui Ju. He shouted loudly, Qin Yui, come out quickly. The next second, a head indeed emerged from the water. But before the figure could fully surface, a gust of cold wind rushed towards me. I shouted, it's me coming out this time. Zhang Yiqing looked at the water pool with a serious expression and muttered, this wind doesn't feel right. Your father's soul has been pulled down again. And the incense just now has turned into 2 short and 1 long. It's commonly said that people fear 3 short and 2 long, while incense fears 2 short and 1 long. Your father must be in some kind of trouble. Seeing this, Zhang Yiqing said, my father must have offended the Yama's officials in the underworld. That's why the little ghost won't release him. To confirm Zhang Yiqing's assumption, the 2 of us immediately found the man who helped summon my father's soul to the underworld a few days ago. After learning the reason for our visit, Godfather said that my father's soul was not in the underworld. When Godfather arrived in the underworld that day, he immediately found an underworld official he knew well. At first, they were chatting and laughing, having a good time. But when he mentioned my father's name, then, the Yama's messengers suddenly changed their expressions. They went completely mad, determined to seize him. This scene terrified Gondwa. He scrambled and rolled his way back to the mortal realm. If it weren't for Zhang Yiqing's timely intervention, he would have died in the underworld and never returned. After hearing Gondwa's story, I was startled. It seems my father really had offended the Yama's messengers. That's why the water ghost in the puddle wouldn't let him go. After understanding the situation, Zhang Yiqing asked about my father's friends before his death. I thought carefully and the first person that came to mind was my second uncle. From my second uncle, I learned that my mother refused to go to the hospital when she gave birth to me, insisting on using the village midwife. As a result, my mother died at home due to dystocia. After hearing what Uncle Air had to say, Zhang Yiqing seemed to have an idea. The next day, he found Wang Po, the midwife who delivered me. Although Wang Po was elderly, she never let go of her cigarette. She had long retired from this profession many years ago. Upon learning that I was the child she had delivered, she simply asked in a calm tone, which family are you from? I'm the son of Qin Yui from the neighboring village. Hearing this, Wang Po's eyes immediately widened in surprise. He turned his head and hurried into the house. You all should leave quickly. I don't know anything. Even if you ask, I won't say anything. Seeing this, Zhang Yiqing slowly approached the door. Your time is running out, yet you still refuse to speak. When you were 5, your mother sold you. At 17, you married, and at 18, you had a child. Your son died at 40, buried in the underworld. Your grandson will soon be 10, right? In a while, not only will you die on the street, but your grandson will also suffer an innocent disaster. Hearing the curses from the old woman inside, she still didn't believe it. Until Zhang Yiqing revealed her secret. The door cap is black. There's a cat hidden inside. A doorway entwined with life. 2 of these 3 things have already happened, right? The third one is coming soon. By then, even the great immortal won't be able to save you. As the sound of the music faded, the old woman finally opened the door. With a thud, she fell to her knees, begging Zhang Yiqing to spare her life. Raising a black cat to absorb the yin energy is not wrong. But if the yin energy becomes too strong, the black cat will die. And who taught you this method? You actually hid a part of your soul in the black cat. A part of your soul was hidden in the black cat. Now that the black cat is dead, that part of you has gone to the underworld. Without a doubt, after these 2 things happen, little ghosts will come for your life. If you want to live, you can. But you must tell me everything about Qin Yui. It's just that when my mother gave birth to me, I refused to go to the hospital no matter what. Even when the doctor arrived at the door, I wouldn't let them in. I insisted on having the village midwife deliver me. When the midwife entered the room, she was terrified by what she saw. My mother's arm was cold. There was no trace of life on her face. It was as if she were delivering a dead baby. Although there had never been a case of delivering a dead baby before. But the midwife, seeing how pitiful my father was, still pulled the baby out. But the child was completely purple, clearly a stillborn. She didn't know what method I used in the end. But somehow I was revived and have lived until now. It must have been some kind of deal with the underworld's messengers. Hearing this, I couldn't help but shudder. It seems I really am no ordinary person. I've asked all the questions I needed to. Zhang Yiqing also told Wang Po the way to break the death calamity on her. First, replace the black cloth at the door with white cloth. When hearing the Yin Chai coming to collect the soul at night, strike the gong 3 times. This is because the little ghosts are most afraid of the sound of gongs and drums. During funerals, striking the gong can even delay the little ghosts from collecting souls. On the way back, I praised Zhang Yiqing for being truly well informed. It's so easy to break the death curse. Then he turned to me and said, "You mean the jade madam? She's definitely going to die. The reason Wang Po couldn't escape is because she did something else. The gong can only block those small ghosts. It can't block other things. Shall we come with me to meet someone tonight?" I was completely confused when I heard this. Who could he possibly want me to meet at this late hour? At midnight, Zhang Yiqing took me to the base. He then sat directly on someone else's tombstone. I quickly reminded him that this is a big taboo, but Zhang Yiqing said that the family under the tombstone should actually be grateful to him. The next second, a gust of cold wind interrupted our conversation. I turned around and was shocked to see the woman in red, the corpse I had pulled ashore a few days ago. I asked Zhang Yiqing in surprise whether she was alive or dead. As soon as I finished speaking, the woman in red actually opened her mouth and repeated my words. "Since you can speak, you must be alive." I saw the woman smile faintly at me. With a loud thud, she fell to the ground. "Xiaohui isn't a human anymore. Take her home. This girl is also a person of unfortunate fate. You saved her, and she will repay you in the future." After returning home, Zhang Yiqing lit a talisman. He dissolved it in water and handed it to me, saying, "Later, give her this bowl of water to drink. Then use hot water to wipe her down. Wipe her body and change her into a clean set of clothes." Upon hearing this, I couldn't help but blush. "Master Zhang, are you kidding me? You're asking me to help a woman wipe her body?" He pointed at the woman and continued, "If she wakes up tomorrow and asks who saved her, you must say it was you who saved her. This is the body of a woman who has been soaking under the Naiha bridge for 8 years. But now, because she drank a sip of the talisman water brewed by Master Zhang, she has come back to life. However, it seems she has completely forgotten everything that happened before. She asked me why I was here. Seeing this, I immediately answered that I had saved her life." Upon hearing this, the girl opened her eyes in disbelief. She even proactively offered to do my laundry and cook for me. I saw her busying around in the kitchen, and she really cooked up a whole table of delicious dishes. Having grown up in a village, I had never seen anything like this. I wondered, is this beautiful girl a human or a ghost? Just then, Zhang Yiqing suddenly appeared. He looked at me with a mischievous grin and said, "Last night, it was you who changed this girl's clothes, right?" I blushed and dared not answer. He could only bury his head and start cooking. Then, Zhang Yiqing turned his head and looked at the girl. "Miss, I have a few questions for you. What is your name, and why did you die tragically in Qinhe River? Also, have you seen the Qin Tai in Qin Tai River?" From the girl's words, he learned her name was Qi Yao. She had also seen the Qin Tai in the river, but she was unwilling to reveal the cause of her death. Upon hearing this, Zhang Yiqing pinched his fingers to calculate. With a serious face, he said to me, "Qin Hui, 3 days later is a good day, but for you, it's utterly terrible." "What do you mean? Am I going to be unlucky again? If you want to safely get through that day, you must gather the whole village at your doorstep." Hearing this, I muttered to myself, looking down. The villagers go out early and return late. Who would want to come to my house? If you can't do it yourself, you can find someone to help you. But you must get it done. After saying that, he turned and disappeared. After telling Qi Yao to wait for me at home, I immediately found my second uncle in the village. I planned to ask him to help me find a way to gather the villagers. Seeing that my second uncle agreed to help, I was about to go home, but unexpectedly learned that the midwife, who delivered me, old Wang, died at home yesterday. She was covered in blood, a gruesome sight. After hearing this, a chill ran down my spine. I vaguely remember that Qi Yao was also covered in blood last night. Could it be that she killed old Wang? After returning home, I was about to question Qi Yao about whether she had killed someone, but was caught off guard by my godfather, who came to visit me. Seeing an additional woman in the house, godfather didn't seem surprised. He simply told me the news of Wang Po's murder. According to his judgment, Wang Po was killed by a nocturnal intruder. He told me to be wary of the girl in the house. As soon as godfather left, Qi Yao suddenly rushed out and shouted at me. "I heard everything you said. I didn't kill anyone." 3 days later, uncle relied on his connections, and managed to invite the whole village to my house for a feast. To entertain the guests, I even specially asked Qi Yao to change into a new outfit. I saw Zhang Yiqing staring at the outfit, muttering, "Qin Hui, I didn't expect you to like this kind of style." He finished speaking and then burst into laughter. Just as everyone was enjoying their meal, a sudden cold wind blew in. I saw a group of people not far away, heading towards my house. They were wearing black robes and carrying a large red bridal sedan chair. The villagers began to speculate about which family was getting married in the middle of the night. After a moment, someone finally noticed something was wrong. The people carrying the sedan chair were walking without their heels touching the ground. The leader of the black-clad men growled angrily, "The river god takes a wife. Make way." Quickly. At this sight, the crowd immediately panicked. At this moment, Zhang Yiqing shouted loudly, "Everyone, don't panic. These little ghosts specialize in sucking the life force from living people. If you scatter, you'll all die without a doubt. I am a Taoist priest from Longhu Mountain. I will protect you all." Seeing that the villagers had given way, the little demons started to play rough with the iron chains. They even tried to use the soul-locking chains to capture their souls. Zhang Yiqing quickly stepped forward, standing in front of the little demons and angrily ordered them to get lost. But there was still one reckless one who charged at him. The soul-locking chain, glowing with a ghostly light, was swung fiercely, but Zhang Yiqing tightly grabbed it in his hand. This was the first time he had seen a living person capable of using the soul-locking chain. Before he could continue thinking, Zhang Yiqing struck him with a palm, sending him flying. This left the villagers nearby in awe. They repeatedly praised Zhang Yiqing as a true dragon tiger celestial master. The lead little ghost on the other side also began to murmur. After weighing the situation, they decided to retreat. After the crowd dispersed, I asked the river god, "The person I wish to marry is Qi Yao. We managed to dodge it today, but what about tomorrow? Next time won't be so easy. The river god of Qintai River might come in person." Hearing that, I almost tripped and fell. What exactly is Qi Yao's identity? Why is she being targeted by the river god? I grabbed Qi Yao's hand and told her not to be afraid. But Zhang Yiqing saw us. "Master Zhang, don't misunderstand. We didn't mean anything like that." Zhang Yiqing turned around and smiled. "You two must remember, do not leave the room tonight, no matter what happens outside." After Master Zhang left, Qi Yao and I were about to turn off the lights and go to sleep. But then there was a knock on the door. I opened the door and it was Gone Duo looking for me. I was about to go out and ask what was the matter with Uncle Qian. Xia Yao gently tugged at my arm. She whispered, "Don't." I comforted Xia Yao, telling her not to be afraid. "He's my godfather." The next second, tears mixed with fresh blood appeared on my godfather's face. Then, with a thud, he collapsed to the ground. Seeing this, Xia Yao insisted that I not go outside, but I couldn't just let my godfather die outside. We had no choice but to pull him inside, over the threshold. I shakily checked my godfather's breath. Then, with a thud, I collapsed onto the floor. My godfather was dead. My godfather was dead, yet he was lying on the ground, constantly turning over, and he always kept his face down. Only then did I realize that my godfather had suddenly died. Qi Yao and I stayed inside the house, afraid to go out, because Zhang Yiqing specifically instructed us before leaving. No matter what happened to the Xing family, we were not to cross the threshold. We placed my godfather's body on a straw mat, and Qi Yao and I sat down in the next room. It was my duty as his godson to keep vigil. At 2 a.m., I was about to let Qi Yao go and rest. A strange noise came from the living room of the house. I lifted the curtain and looked. The body, which had been lying on the floor, was now on its stomach. But I clearly remembered that my godfather's body was face up. The sight in front of me made the hairs on my neck stand up. To confirm whether my godfather was still alive, I carefully checked again. He was definitely dead. How could he have turned over on his own? Although I didn't understand, I still turned over my godfather's body. This time, I planned to stay awake. I wanted to see what was really going on. I don't know how much time passed, but I dozed off. When I opened my eyes, I found that Qi Yao hadn't managed to stay awake either, and my godfather's body had turned face down again. Seeing this, I hurried to turn him over. But this time, I couldn't move him at all. It seems like after my godfather's body died, it grew 300 halls. At this time, Qi Yao was also awakened by the noise outside. We both gathered all our strength but still couldn't move my godfather. After struggling for a whole day, we had no choice but to rest. We decided to cook some food to fill our stomachs. Just then, we heard Zhang Yiqing's voice from outside the door. "The body hasn't eaten yet. You should eat first. This isn't following the rules." When I saw Zhang Yiqing, I quickly recounted what had just happened. But he told me to bring him a bowl of rice. He said that the dead shouldn't set out on their journey hungry. Otherwise, their souls will scatter before reaching the gates of hell. That's why death row inmates are always given a full meal before their execution. I thought maybe I hadn't eaten enough earlier. That's why my face was down. Upon hearing this, I quickly placed the rice on my godfather's head. Then, according to Zhang Yiqing's instructions, we closed the doors and windows. We lit a candle and placed it inside the room. The three of us waited outside the door. A few minutes later, sounds of food being chewed indeed came from inside the room. I asked Zhang Yiqing in confusion, "Can I go take a look?" "Want to see? Just open the door a crack and peek quietly." "But you can't look, girl." Although I was scared, I still wanted to see Gone Duo one last time. My body trembled as I peeked inside. I saw Gone Duo lying on the ground, his head stuck in a bowl. He only stopped when he'd had his fill. I had just laid Gone Duo down flat, when Zhang Yiqing called me to come outside with him. When we arrived at Gon Duo's door, the couplet on the door read, "A dead man announces his own death, a widow wails, auspicious." What does this all mean? Zhang Yiqing lowered his head and said, "You're a smart man. He wanted to die at your doorstep. He knew his time was near, and had already prepared his coffin at home. Your godfather fulfilled the prophecy of a dead man announcing his own death." Next was the widow's wailing. After hearing that, I was completely dumbfounded, but Zhang Yiqing told me to use this coffin to carry my godfather's body. Don't worry about anything else. The next day, after putting my godfather in the coffin, I was crying my heart out, when I suddenly heard footsteps outside the door. I turned my head and saw a woman's silhouette. I questioningly asked her who she was looking for. The woman then blurted out my father's name. Learning that my father had just passed away, she suddenly knelt down and burst into laughter. She kept muttering that my father was her benefactor. Seeing her cry so sorrowfully, I was about to help her up, but I noticed the woman's tears were as black as ink. The next second, the woman twisted her head and smirked. It scared Qi Yao and me half to death. Before we could figure out what happened, she left without looking back. Could this be the widow's wailing that Zhang Yiqing mentioned? "Godfather, what on earth are you doing?" The next day, after burying my godfather, I told Zhang Yiqing about the woman's wailing, but he still refused to reveal the whole story. He also wants me to bring 2 jin of white rice and my wife. Tonight, take me to meet the river god and get it cleared up. Hearing this, I was stunned. I'm all alone, where would I have a wife? Look at my big mouth. What I meant was to bring Qi Yao. The river god wants to marry Qi Yao. If I bring her, it's like walking straight into a trap. Hurry up, don't waste time. If we're late, it won't be good. I brought the items that Zhang Yiqing instructed us to take. That evening, we arrived at Qintai River, to summon the river god. We had to pour 2 bowls of plain rice into the water. Then, we set the summoning charm on fire. The ritual paper burned on the water's surface. A massive wave suddenly surged in the Qintai River. Soon, a dark shadow slowly emerged from the water. Who goes there? Why are you disturbing me at this late hour? The little ghost beside the river god muttered softly. These were the ones who stopped the river god from getting married last time. Upon hearing this, the river god gave an order. A group of little ghosts rushed up all at once. Zhang Yiqing calmly stepped forward. With a sharp sound, he ripped off his sleeve. After throwing the sleeve to the ground, the torn sleeve began to split and grow. In just a few seconds, it wrapped up all the little demons like Songzi. Upon seeing this, the river god, He Ting, gasped. He leapt into the air and charged at Zhang Yiqing. Zhang merely raised his hand. The river behind us rose 100 meters high. All at once, it crashed down towards us. But just as it was about to hit Zhang Yiqing, it suddenly stopped. As if it had encountered its master, it all turned around and crashed towards the river god. The river god, being attacked by his own river, was knocked down. Enraged and humiliated, he naturally refused to give up. You've become the Qintai River god, yet you're about to cause a great disaster. Don't you understand? Upon hearing this, the river god froze on the spot. Who are you? Who I am is unimportant. You only need to remember who made you the river god. Hearing this, the river god took a breath and stopped attacking. He honestly answered Zhang Yiqing's question. The scene in front of me really made me feel uncomfortable. The river god just surrendered like that. Could it be that Zhang Yiqing is the sea god? When Zhang Yiqing asked if someone had recently died in the river, and then stood up by themselves after death, the river god's face showed shock. He muttered that there indeed was such a person recently, but I don't know his origins either. And my father's soul isn't with him. Qin Yi's soul isn't with you. Forget it. Then help me find out who that man who stood up is. If you can't find out in 3 days, not even a god can save you. Saying this, he turned and left, leaving Qin Taiha, the river god, utterly bewildered. On the way home, I asked Zhang Yiqing where my father's soul really was. Besides this Qintai river, where else could it be? Xiaohui, remember this. This river isn't as simple as it looks. After returning home, Zhang Yiqing warned me that something big would happen soon, but he wouldn't say what it was. With no other choice, I went to my room to check on my father's condition, but I found that my father had disappeared without a trace, and there was a note left on the table. I opened it. The words, "Don't look for me," were glaring at me. At this moment, Zhang Yiqing spoke. Don't worry, your father is fine. He just offended someone he shouldn't have. I told you earlier that something big was happening. It means that person is about to be resurrected. In ancient times, there was an emperor who achieved great accomplishments in his life. He sought immortality for the sake of his son. Here, he built a Qin terrace. The Qin Terrace River is named after it. Upon hearing this, I couldn't help but ask. Could the emperor you're talking about be Qin Shi Huang? Let's not talk about that for now. If you want to see your father, light 3 incense sticks at the door tomorrow morning. Wait until dark, and call your father's name 3 times. But during this time, you must make sure the incense doesn't go out. In order to bring my father's soul back, I must light 3 incense sticks at the door after the rooster crows. And I have to keep the incense burning all day. So, I stayed there without eating or drinking. I crouched on the ground, continuously tending to the incense burner. But once the incense burned out, I immediately replaced it with a new one. It was a long wait until the sun began to set. I hurriedly called out my name 3 times in all directions. But after a long time, no one responded. Just when I was feeling hopeless, someone suddenly called my name from behind. I turned around, and it was my second uncle. It turned out my second uncle had just seen my bamboo shoots. He ran past the window of his house. So he hurried to inform me. Hearing this, I quickly ran toward my second uncle's house. Sure enough, I saw a figure under the large tree not far away. It was my father. When my father saw me, he turned and walked away. Although I desperately chased after him, I could never catch up with my father walking. Until we followed him to the Chin Tai River. My father suddenly leaped up and jumped in. Seeing this, I was about to jump into the river to save him, when a large hand grabbed my shoulder. Don't jump in. You can't save him. As Zhang Yiqing's words fell, suddenly, a bronze pillar rose up from the river. When it was fully revealed, it turned out to be a large altar. I saw him making a hand gesture and saying, I was just about to ask if fish counted, when the river water suddenly surged toward me like a broken dam. Zhang Yiqing shouted loudly, hurry, run. With him here, nothing unexpected should happen. I rushed back home in a panic. When I got there, I found the area in front of my house was already crowded with people. When I leaned closer to take a look, I saw several young men frantically banging on my front door. I asked my second uncle, confused, what was going on. It turned out that the villagers had found out that the person the river god wanted to marry was Chi Yao, so they were going to drag Chi Yao out to offer her to the river god to ensure everyone's safety. Hearing this, I took a step forward, blocking the door and preventing them from getting closer. But the village head had me lifted up and carried away. She slapped me again across the face. Just as tensions were rising, the wooden door slowly opened. Chi Yao stepped out and replaced me. She was trading her life for mine. The villagers led Wei Yao to the Chin Tai River. They tossed a pile of offerings into the water. Then they forced Wei Yao to walk into the river. I saw Chi Yao stepping closer to the center of the river. I desperately called out her name. Qin Huai, don't worry. I'm fine. Seeing Chi Yao completely disappear beneath the river's surface, the villagers finally showed satisfied smiles. But the next second, a man's voice came from the water. Are you trying to disregard human life? Hearing this, the onlookers scattered. I also took the opportunity to jump into the water. I pulled Chi Yao, who was nearly unconscious, out. I was about to take Chi Yao back to the shore, but unexpectedly, the village head was still waiting here and hadn't left. Then, my second uncle behind me suddenly pointed at the river water, stammering and coughing, unable to speak. The next second, he ran away without looking back. A dark figure slowly emerged from the water. He stretched out his big hand and lunged at the two of us. I angrily shouted, who the hell are you? Show yourself. At that moment, a familiar voice said, little brat, you've got some guts, huh? You don't even respect your own father anymore. I grabbed him and asked, what's going on here? But he just smiled and said, this girl's not bad. We'll talk about the rest when we get home. But when I got home, I eagerly asked him if he wasn't leaving this time. You have to grow up on your own. Some things I can't tell you yet. Hearing this, I lowered my head and fell into deep thought. At this moment, Zhang Yiqing's voice suddenly came from outside the door. Seeing Zhang Yiqing, my father was very surprised. He even wanted to kneel down to him. The past is the past. No need for formalities. Things have come to this pass. It's better to tell Qin Huai everything so he can be prepared. You went down to the river yourself today. You should have a clear idea of the situation there. Upon hearing this, my father suddenly prostrated himself before Zhang Yiqing. Please, save little Huai. Back then, I stole the pills from the Chin Tai River to save Xiao Huai. I did steal the pills from the Chin Tai River. The people in the river are powerful, but they've always been bound by chains. So I kept searching for valuable things to compensate him, but he remained relentless. Until recently, I discovered that the chains no longer restrain him. He's about to break free. The first person I need to find after coming out is definitely me. That's why I thought of playing dead to avoid disaster. I went into the river this time to investigate the situation, and then take Xiao Huai away from here. Upon hearing this, Zhang Yiqing said firmly, you can't escape. Your son ate his things. How could he not be angry? Then, I took a deep breath and asked Chi Yao, who was standing nearby, who they were. This is the wife I found for Qin Huai. What do you think? In less than a second, my hearty laughter echoed through the sky. I couldn't have asked for more. Good son. I've agreed to this wife on your behalf. Dad, what are you talking about? Who do you think is trapped under the Chin Tai River? My father and Zhang Yiqing exchanged a glance. Zhang Yiqing lowered his head and murmured. This story starts with Emperor Qin Shi Huang. He ordered his subordinates to help him search for the elixir of immortality. The leader of the search party was a eunuch named Zhao Gao. After being appointed by Qin Shi Huang, Zhao Gao traveled far and wide without leaving any stone unturned. In the end, he really did find the elixir of immortality, but he did not present it to Qin Shi Huang. but he swallowed it himself. Upon learning this, Emperor Qin immediately ordered Zhao Gao's execution. But regardless of whether he was hacked to pieces or burned alive, Zhao Gao's body always restored itself to its original state. Having no other choice, he ordered his men to use refined iron to forge chains to bind Zhao Gao. Then he sealed him at the bottom of the Qintai River. Hearing this, I almost tripped. So you're saying that the great enemy of my family is actually Zhao Gao, who has been locked at the bottom of the water for over 1,000 years. And now, with thunder rolling, Zhao Gao is about to break free. In order to avoid implicating the villagers, he decided to go alone to the Qintai River to seek redemption from Zhao Gao. Looking at my distant figure, Zhang Yiqing comforted me, saying it wasn't the right time to act recklessly. With his protection, Zhao Gao can't harm me in the slightest. I questioned Zhang Yiqing about that year, whether the Emperor Qin's elixir of immortality came in 2 pills. One was swallowed by Zhao Gao, and the other was stolen by my father to prolong my life. If that's the case, why didn't Zhao Gao offer the other pill to Emperor Qin? Why would he rather endure 2,000 years of suffering underwater? As the words left my lips, a lightning bolt split the sky. Seeing this, Zhang Yiqing shouted, "No good. Qin Huai, are you afraid? If you're not afraid, then come with me to the Qintai River. Let's see how big a splash that Zhao Gao can make." Hearing this, I almost wet myself. I knew this would happen. At this time, Qiao came over and also wanted to go together. As soon as we arrived at the Qintai River, we discovered a group of villagers are kneeling and bowing to the river. The next second, a huge wave surges into the sky. Immediately afterward, a massive Qin platform slowly rises from the water. Seeing this, the kneeling villagers shouted, "Welcome back, my lord." With a sharp cracking sound, the iron chains, forged from 1,000-year-old cold iron, break apart one by one. Amidst flashes of lightning, Zhao Gao's figure slowly emerges. "I didn't expect to see you again, my lord. Do you even have the face to see me? After all this time, you're still so forceful." At this moment, Zhang Yiqing said to me, "Qin Huai, listen carefully. I am the one and only emperor throughout history, Qin Shi Huang." Having said that, Zhang Yiqing took off and charged towards Zhao Gao, leaving me completely dumbfounded. I never expected Zhang Yiqing to be Qin Shi Huang. But shouldn't Qin Shi Huang have died long ago? Seeing Zhang Yiqing's ruthless demeanor, I knew he wouldn't let me go. Zhao Gao gave a command, and the villagers behind him all charged forward, brandishing long knives. The overwhelming number of people was quite imposing. Zhao Gao turned his head and smiled slightly at me. "Follow my orders. Catch that kid, and I'll reward you handsomely." As soon as the words left his mouth, countless eyes immediately turned to look at me. Then, they all rushed toward me without fear for their lives. Even my second uncle was among them. In a critical moment, Zhang Yiqing arrived just in time. He raised his hand and struck at the crowd. In an instant, he knocked the crazed villagers to the ground. "Anyone who dares to cause trouble again will be sent to meet the Lord of the Underworld." Seeing the villagers fleeing in all directions, Zhao Gao said sharply, "Now you've become a true hermit king, and you still dare to act like an emperor here. Do you really think I can't deal with you?" Zhao Gao raised his hand. The waters of the Qintai River immediately rose into the air. They gathered into 2 massive water dragons. "The pain I've endured over the years, I will return it tenfold today." As the respected Emperor Qin, Zhang Yiqing was about to be swallowed by the water dragon. But he remained as steady as Mount Tai, not the slightest bit careless. Then, there was a loud crashing sound. In an instant, the water dragon turned into a rainstorm. Upon seeing this, Zhao Gao threw out 2. And they wrapped around. He was directly bound in place by Zhang Yiqing. "My lord, the fine iron chains you painstakingly crafted. I never expected that in the end, they would bind you. Today, I'll let you experience what it feels like to be trapped underwater for years." With that, Zhang Yiqing was suddenly thrown into the Qintai River. Seeing this, I was about to rush forward to help, but I noticed he came out completely unharmed. "Zhao Gao, is that all you've got?" Shireen landed. Zhang Yiqing leaped up and charged towards his opponent. Seeing the situation was wrong, Zhao Gao quickly dodged. He grabbed me. He tried to use me to threaten Zhang Yiqing into surrendering. "Go ahead and kill him. Then I'll avenge Qin Huai." Hearing this, I desperately crossed my legs in protest. The next second, I only heard a snap. Zhao Gao actually really broke my neck. When I opened my eyes again, I found my soul had already left my body. I even saw my own corpse in Zhao Gao's hands. I saw him throw my body on the ground. Qiao hurriedly stepped forward to check, but I suddenly found my soul, Jilly, standing beside me. I asked in confusion, "Qiao, can you see me?" Qiao comforted me, "Don't be afraid. I'll ask Master Zhang to help think of a way." Meanwhile, Zhao Gao was at the end of his rope. He was quickly chained up by Zhang Yiqing. For so many years, no one dared to threaten me, although I couldn't kill you back then. But if the Emperor commands, I must die. "Qin Huai, come here. I ask you, are you willing to execute someone?" Looking at the gleaming blade in my hand, and Zhao Gao, who kept mocking me, I took a deep breath and said, "Master Zhang, I will." Upon hearing this, Zhao Gao trembled all over. I am a high-ranking official with great influence. What right do you, a mere commoner, have to kill me? As soon as the words fell, Zhang Yiqing patted my shoulder and said, "Don't worry. He will soon have the right to do so. Now, I hereby appoint Qin Bei as the highest general under the emperor. He may execute all who are disloyal or unfilial." I approached Xiao Gao slowly with an axe in hand, but he showed no fear whatsoever, because ever since Xiao Gao ate Emperor Qin's elixir, he became immortal. I raised my axe and struck fiercely. Although the blade cut through his neck perfectly, the wound healed up in the next moment. If one strike doesn't work, then I'll try twice. Having said that, I snatched up the broadsword and struck again, accompanied by a sharp clang. This blow was like hitting steel. Even a piece of the blade was damaged. At this time, Xiao Gao sneered at me. "It's over. If the next blow doesn't work, you won't have a chance to defeat me." Hearing this, I was about to swing my knife, but Zhang Yiqing stopped me. What he just said was not wrong. For this third strike, you need to carefully consider in whose name you will strike. If this strike doesn't kill him, everything will be for nothing. So, in whose name should it be struck? Seeing my distress, Qiao suddenly stepped forward. He whispered in my ear. Upon hearing this, I suddenly understood. "Today, I will avenge those you killed. As the Emperor's foremost general, I will slay this traitor with my own hands." As soon as the words left my lips, the wronged souls in the Qintai River rose into the air, all converging on the blade of my sword. Before Xiao Gao could react, my great sword flew out, slicing through him. This time, Xiao Gao, who had lived for over 2,000 years, was killed by a single strike from me. Yet his soul still hasn't dissipated. But before he could rage for even a second, those vengeful spirits swarmed toward him. Amidst the sounds of their wailing, Xiao Gao's evil life was completely ended. At this moment, Zhang Yiqing suddenly shouted for me to hurry to his side, because the messengers of the underworld were coming to claim my soul. As soon as the sound faded, several figures appeared not far away. A black-clad ghost guard growled angrily in a low voice. "Wild ghost, Qin Huai, come here quickly." Seeing this, Zhang Yiqing angrily reprimanded the little ghost and took out the soul summoning document. But clearly, they were unaware of Zhang Yiqing's true identity as Qin Shi Huang. It wasn't until Zhang Yiqing mentioned the name Huang Dongjun that the few ghost guards realized the man in front of them was no ordinary person. The formidable earth god just arrived at the riverbank. He muttered, "Who is so reckless and bold?" But as soon as he saw Zhang Yiqing, he immediately softened. After Zhang Yiqing went through the death list, he found that my name was not on it. It turned out that someone in the underworld, wearing a black robe, had secretly informed the earth god. He was sent tonight to the Qintai River to collect my soul. Upon learning of this, Zhang Yiqing was furious. He ordered the land god to find out the person's identity within 3 days, and I was able to return to my body and live again. When I rejoiced at my narrow escape from death, Zhang Yiqing suddenly said, "Your soul is still unstable now that you've just returned to your body. Any stray ghost could seize your body. As the saying goes, the thunder god rules the heavens, and the maternal uncle rules the earth. If you can ask your uncle to come over tonight, those ghosts won't dare to approach you." Just as Qi Yao and I were about to enter the house, a growl suddenly came from behind us. Turning around, it was indeed a wandering ghost trying to take over my body. Seeing this, Qi Yao quickly told me to hold my breath. Those little ghosts must have smelled the scent of my flesh. If they find me, it will be disastrous. After successfully avoiding the little ghost's pursuit, Qi Yao and I had just caught our breath, when the front door of my house suddenly flew open. Looking closely, I saw that the area outside was crowded with vengeful spirits. Just when I thought we were surely doomed, Qi Yao took a gong from inside the house. It turned out she planned to use the gong to clear the way. Then, we were going to my uncle's house to ask him to come help exorcise the spirits. Although there were many little ghosts along the way, the sound of the gong made the journey relatively smooth. Seeing how hard Qi Yao was hitting it, I couldn't help but want to try the feeling of striking the gong myself. Just as we were about to reach my uncle's door, I accidentally smashed the gong face into pieces. The little ghosts behind me seized the opportunity and swarmed in. In just a few seconds, both I and Qi Yao had been surrounded by 100 ghosts. I desperately climbed toward my uncle's gate, shouting for help. The next second, a bolt of lightning struck down from the sky. With a loud bang, it turned all the little ghosts to dust. My uncle finally heard my voice. He brought me and Qi Yao inside. After explaining the situation, I took him to my home that very night. And those little ghosts indeed hid at a distance, too afraid to come closer. Just then, a knock suddenly came from the door. When the door was opened, the visitor was none other than Zhang Yiqing. Seeing that we were both safe and sound, Zhang Yiqing said to me, "Qin Huai, if I told you your godfather is still alive, would you believe it? Would you believe it?" Qi Qiao and I immediately followed him to my godfather's house. Looking in the direction Zhang Yiqing pointed, I was surprised to see a complete piece of cowhide hanging on the wall. I removed the cowhide and touched it. The surface still radiated a faint warmth. Could it really be as Zhang Yiqing said? Did I actually cause old Nyo to die in his place? but I was the one who personally put the body of Gon Duo into the coffin. How do I explain this? If I'm not mistaken, there should be a cow's head in your godfather's coffin right now. Seeing my surprised face, unable to believe it, Zhang Yiqing told me to bring the cowhide and go with him. One look and you'd understand. After leaving the house, just as I was about to lock the door, I noticed Zhang Yiqing had scattered something at the doorstep of my godfather's house. Following him, we found Zhang Jufu, who was slaughtering a cow in the village, and happened to catch Zhang Jufu performing a vigil for his son, who had been killed by Zhao Gao. Seeing this, Zhang Yiqing said the coffin must be buried immediately. Otherwise, something big will happen tonight. With that, he pushed open the coffin lid with a bang. The man lying inside had already grown 2 fangs, and his fingernails were also much longer than normal. If you don't bury him now, your son will definitely become a ghoul. Hearing this, Zhang Jufu was shocked. He quickly nodded in agreement. After a series of questions from Zhang Yiqing, I confirmed that in the afternoon of the day before yesterday, he did indeed buy an ox head here. Hearing this, I broke into a cold sweat. But it was clearly in the morning, 3 days ago, when the local people saw him. How could he have come to buy an ox head in the afternoon? From what I learned from Zhang Jufu, Xian Duo moved to this village 10 years ago. He became famous for saving a child who had fallen to his death, and that child was the grandson of the old woman from the village next door. Leaving Zhang Jufu's house, my mind was in chaos. What exactly was my godfather trying to achieve by doing this? Soon after, Zhang Yiqing took me to find Wang Po's grandson. When he learned that we were here because of something my godfather had done, he absolutely refused to let us into the house. Seeing how stubborn the man was, Zhang Yiqing snorted and said, "Your deceased grandmother will come to see you in 3 days." Hearing this, the man, instead of being happy, showed a look of fear. With a loud bang, he slammed the door shut and yelled at us to get lost. It turned out that Zhang Yiqing's words just now were to observe the man's reaction. Normally, hearing that a deceased relative is coming to see them, one would show some joy. But the Jade Pendant's grandson was filled with terror. This suggests that Wang Po was most likely murdered by him, and his grandson isn't his real grandson. The same goes for Zhang Jufu's son. Normally, a household registration change after someone's death takes at least a month, but Zhang Jufu's son's household registration was changed only 3 days after his death. This shows he was in a half-dead state for at least a month. There must be a mastermind behind this in the vicinity. And this person also has extremely high skills in refining households. My father went to Qintai River and never came back. It was also to escape from him. After listening to Zhang Yiqing's analysis, I felt as if I had been enlightened. It seems that to find my father, I must first catch hold of this layout. I took out the dry ginseng from my family's leather pouch and asked how to handle this. The cow's head and cowhide are separated. If the cow's head knows about the cowhide, it will definitely come looking for you. Hearing this, I almost wet myself. I quickly asked Zhang Yiqing how to break the spell. Qin Huai, you need to remember 3 things. First, never eat the fish from Qintai River. Second, if you see a blind man lighting a lamp, don't reveal it. Third, if anyone asks whether I am a priest from Longhu Mountain, you must say no. I've been starving for 8 days, yet he dared not eat the big fish in his hand. He even buried it in the ground and stepped on it hard twice. Just after burying the fish from Qintaiha, I heard a cry behind me. I followed the sound and found an elderly person holding a flashlight, crying. I asked him in confusion what he was crying about. He suddenly looked up and said his flashlight was broken, but he's clearly blind. How could he possibly use a flashlight? Just as I was utterly perplexed, Qiao suddenly called out to me, telling me not to answer. Zhang Yiqing whispered, "A blind man using a light, we can't expose it." Just then, Zhang Jufu from the village happened to pass by. He took the blind man's flashlight and muttered, "Your flashlight is indeed broken." Upon hearing this, the blind man suddenly became excited. He snatched the flashlight from Jufu's hand and slammed it onto the ground with a loud crash, shouting that it was broken. It was finally broken. Then he started running frantically towards the village entrance. Meanwhile, Zhang Jufu came to inform me that we would go to the east side of the village later to watch the opera troupe perform. I casually agreed, and after Zhang Jufu left, Qi Yao and I were both feeling nervous about what had just happened. Zhang Yiqing's voice suddenly appeared behind me. "Qin Huai, where's that fish? Hurry, take me to see it." Upon hearing this, I quickly took out a shovel and started digging for the fish. But to my surprise, the fish I buried half an hour ago was still alive. He lifted the fish, muttering, "Luckily, this fish didn't die. Otherwise, this would be a big problem." He told me to quickly bring a basin of clean water. After putting the big fish into the basin, Zhang Yiqing actually started talking to the fish. But how could the fish possibly talk back? "If you don't speak, I'll stew you into fish soup." The words were barely out when the big fish actually spoke. It said it owed us a favor. But before asking questions, he had to remove the red string from its mouth. He took off the red string from the fish's mouth and took a look. Hanging below the red string was a talisman, and that large fish was the transformed form of the Qintai river god. From the river god's mouth, he learned that the person who sealed him called himself a Taoist priest from Longhu Mountain. Although that person wore a black robe and didn't reveal his face, his magical power was incredibly strong. Hearing this, Zhang Yiqing seemed to have found the answer. Let the river god go and rest for a while. Watching the river god's figure fade away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. If it weren't for Zhang Yiqing's early warning, I would have ended up eating the river god, and I would have offended the dragon palace, bringing disaster upon myself. Seeing my terrified expression, Zhang Yiqing smiled and said the best part is yet to come. Tonight, follow him to the cemetery and you'll see. At midnight, we followed him to the cemetery. Zhang Yi sneered, your village hides quite a few experts. Before I could ask what he meant, Qi Yao suddenly pointed to the distance and shouted, look, that blind man from heaven is actually burning something in the graveyard. He seems to be searching for something. After fumbling for a moment, he stopped in front of a tombstone. The next second, he was on his hands and knees, frantically digging up the grave. Not long after, they dug up a recently buried male corpse. He first leaned the body against a large tree by the grave, then took out a lit candle, and directly burned it against the corpse's chin. Accompanied by the sizzling sound of roasting meat, drips of corpse oil flowed down the man's cheeks. Just as Qi Yao and I thought he was going to collect corpse oil, the old blind man actually stuck out his tongue, and licked up all the oil, swallowing it. Seeing this, I quickly told Qi Yao to close her eyes and not look. Meanwhile, Zhang Yiqing planned to take us to catch the thief. By this time, the blind man had finished the oil, and was about to leave when we blocked his way. Noticing someone approaching, he suddenly turned his head. To our surprise, his blind eyes had returned to normal. The next second, the blind man twisted his body and lunged at us. But he was sent flying by Zhang Yiqing's kick. It directly separated his soul from his body. Old blind Qiu turned around, his face full of shock. He asked himself incredulously, I'm not dead, why is my soul leaving my body? Don't you know whether you're dead or alive? You've been suffering in the mortal world for these decades, haven't you? Why don't you want to go to the underworld? Hearing this, the blind man looked puzzled. He seemed not to understand Zhang Yiqing's words. Don't you understand yet? Then let me tell you a story. Decades ago, a miner was killed by a rockfall while mining. His soul was thus trapped in the mine. In his despair, a man suddenly appeared. I immediately questioned Zhang Yiqing about his identity. No matter what, I would never betray my master. You think he's helping you. Actually, he's harming you. Look at your body. I removed the old blind man's hat. There were actually 3 large holes on the back of his head. 3-hole body refinement is a type of body refinement technique. Your master doesn't want you to survive tonight. After hearing this, the old blind man finally woke up, but his soul began to gradually dissipate. You're about to lose your soul. If you want to take revenge, quickly say your master's name. In the last second before his soul vanished, the old blind man shouted loudly, he is in Qin. Before he could finish, the soul that should have dissipated decades ago completely shattered. At this moment, Zhang Yiqing also had his answer. He turned and walked towards my godfather's house. When I arrived at my godfather's doorstep, I suddenly noticed 2 footprints clearly imprinted on the white ash I had scattered before. Zhang Yiqing told me to go check on godfather. He wanted to know if the cowhide in the house was gone. If it's gone, then it's my godfather's coffin, and the ox head inside has come out to steal the ox hide. Now that the ox head and ox body are combined, something big is bound to happen. He then instructed me to take the elixir he made, and find Uncle Zhang, who was blind. Then, in front of the whole village, I brewed the elixir into a soup and made him drink it. After drinking the soup, Uncle Zhang first felt a strange itch in his eyes. A moment later, when the bandage was removed, the left eye that had been blinded had actually returned to normal. Everyone was shocked when they saw this. They all begged Master Zhang to give them a bottle of the elixir. Seeing how excited everyone was, I took the opportunity to throw out the bait. I said that if they wanted Master Zhang to help make the elixir, they would need to find the raw materials themselves. I'm sure there are many in the Qintai River. Hearing this, everyone perked up. They all rushed towards Qintai River. Li, in the twilight, ran all the way home at full speed. He was holding a small bottle for refining pills. I didn't expect him to actually find it. Before I could ask in detail, another group of people swarmed in. Everyone seems to have made some progress. At this moment, Zhang Yiqing finally appeared. Seeing the small bottles in the villagers' hands, he explained, please remain calm. Refining pills takes time. Please write your names on the pill bottles you have, and hand them all over to me. Once I finish refining, I will distribute them. After collecting all the powdered pills, I questioningly asked why the Qintai River had so many pill jars. According to Zhang Yiqing, Zhao Gao back then had the alchemists at the bottom of the Qintai River refine the elixir of immortality. These semi-finished pills are what the alchemist left behind. But among these semi-finished pills, only one can be refined into an immortal pill, because someone couldn't wait, and placed the real one among the fake to have him help refine it into a pill. And this person is the owner of the bottle he mentioned, Qin Jiang. Hearing this, I suddenly understood. It turns out Zhang Yiqing was using the guise of alchemy to lure the big fish. Qin Jiang is also half a relative of mine. But is he really the one pulling the strings behind this? Under the lead of Li Guangguan, we arrived at Qin Jiang's doorstep, but after knocking for a long time, no one responded. Seeing this, Zhang Yiqing shouted, "This is bad." He kicked open the wooden door and found that Qin Jiang had actually hanged himself in his home. It looked like he had been dead for at least 3 or 4 days. But just a moment ago, someone had clearly seen him delivering the pill bottle. Who exactly is that person? Just as the villagers gathered around, gossiping and discussing, Zhang Yiqing suddenly shouted, "Stop." He then quickly rushed out of the house. Seeing this, Qi Yao and I gathered all our strength and followed. We finally found Zhang Yiqing by the side of the Qintai River. And not far away, the figure was none other than the man in the black robe who had tried to harm my entire family. Seeing my emotions running high, Zhang Yiqing stopped me and said to him, "You've been dodging and causing harm to so many people. Isn't it time for an explanation? What do you want me to explain to you? Do you even have the right to ask?" Upon hearing this, I broke out in cold sweat instantly, because his voice was strikingly similar to that of my deceased godfather. When he removed his black robe, the killer who wanted to murder everyone in the village is actually me, Qian Duo. Zhang Yiqing comforted me, saying that my godfather is already dead. The person in front of me is just wearing his skin. But my godfather on the other side said that Zhang Yiqing is the biggest liar. He told me to quickly hide behind him. Although my godfather saved my life, Zhang Yiqing has also helped me a lot, running around for me. Who should I believe in the end? Just as Qi Yao was advising me to believe Master Zhang, my godfather suddenly snapped his fingers. Immediately, a thunderbolt struck down, directly hitting Qi Yao. "Zhang Yiqing, you used this girl's body to break my formation. Now, I've had a thunderbolt kill her, we're even." My hands trembled as I checked Qi Yao's breath. Qi Yao really died. Seeing this, I quickly begged Zhang Yiqing to save her. Qin Huai picked the girl up. "Don't let her feet touch the ground." After picking Qi Yao up, I learned from Zhang Yiqing and Godfather's conversation that they were both from the Heavenly Master's mansion. Moreover, Godfather was Zhang Yiqing's senior brother. The two of them, in order to settle the score, actually used jade tokens, which symbolize their own spiritual prowess, as the stakes. They placed their jade tokens in the center and began their magical duel. Qian Daddy chanted a spell, summoning thunder from the sky, but Zhang Yiqing easily absorbed it into his body. Zhang Yiqing's thunder was also easily evaded by Qian Daddy. As the two slowly reached a deadlock, Qian Daddy suddenly summoned 4 bolts of thunder, intending to settle their fate. Just as the lightning was about to strike Zhang Yiqing, it all veered around him, avoiding him. Qian Dai was greatly shocked at the sight. "What exactly did you do? Why did the lightning avoid you?" "They should, of course, avoid me. Since ancient times, the Heavenly Master's mansion has been inherited by successive Zhang Heavenly Masters. And my surname is also Zhang. Don't you understand yet?" Upon learning that Zhang Yiqing was now the current celestial master of the Heavenly Master's house, Yang Duangdong nearly dropped his jaw in shock. He immediately called upon the 4 divine generals to assist him. But unfortunately, Zhang Yiqing's power was too overwhelming. With a single wave of his hand, he summoned a thunderous storm. One strike was all it took to turn Yang Duangdong into something unrecognizable. Just as I was relieved that Zhang Yiqing won, suddenly, the water under the Qintai River surged. A water dragon burst from the water, attacking me directly. Luckily, Zhang Yiqing managed to push me out of the way just in time. After we both recovered, Grandmaster Yang, who had just been charred black, had vanished without a trace. Could he have been taken away by the river god of the Qintai River? Picking up the jade pendant on the ground, Zhang. He clearly instructed me to take Qi Yao away. He still had some matters to attend to. I carefully placed Qi Yao's body at home. My mood instantly plummeted. Just as I was consumed by anxiety, a knock came suddenly from outside the door. Opening the door, I saw that it was Qin Tai, the river god. Although I didn't have a good feeling about this river god, but he said he was acting on Zhang Yiqing's behalf. He was to take Qi Yao and me to a place. We followed him to the Qintai River. A triangular opening appeared before us. The river god pulled me into the cave. Entering the cave, I suddenly discovered that a statue of the Dragon King was enshrined inside, and there were traces of someone burning incense and praying. Although the cave entrance is right outside Qintai, and the river is nearby, there's not a drop of water inside the cave. Zhang Yiqing told the river god that if I came here, my requests would definitely be granted. Even though I didn't understand the meaning of those words, I still went to the altar and drew a bamboo slip. The words on the slip seemed to be related to rainwater. But how can I awaken the Dragon King to revive Qi Yao? Just as I was feeling confused, the bamboo skewers suddenly flashed blue. An invisible force instantly surged into my body, and everything around me seemed to freeze. I was also dizzy from the flashing blue light. When I opened my eyes again, I was actually in a dilapidated Dragon King temple, and there was an incredibly ugly monster lunging at me. Seeing this, I cried out, "Master Zhang, save me." The next second, a faint golden light appeared on my palm, and I killed the monster with it. Before I could even understand what just happened, a monster that looked just like me, actually called me Dragon King. "Who are you? Why do you look exactly like me?" Hearing this, the monster approached me and murmured, "Too immature. The time isn't right yet." After saying that, it let out a twisted sound and grabbed my neck. It kept growling, "Too weak, too weak." It even bit its own hand. It seemed like it had been hungry for a long time. Then it vanished into the mist. And I returned to the real world. The river god looked at me in shock. He quickly asked what had happened. Looking at the bamboo skewers on the ground, I pondered, could it be that I am the Dragon King? After returning home, the river god set down Chi Yao and left. I, on the other hand, stared at the dim sky, feeling lost. At that moment, a figure slowly approached my house. As it got closer, I realized it was a strange acting fortune teller. This man rose to the peak of life through fortune telling. He especially liked to bet his own lifespan with others. And the bets he made were always strange. I told him it would rain at 3 o'clock today, and the rainfall would exceed level 1 of the steps. But he insisted it would rain at 4 o'clock. He even wanted to bet his soul against mine. Thinking that Chi Yao, who had been struck by lightning, was just short of a soul, I resolutely accepted the bet. It was as if I had encountered a lifesaver. I quickly told him everything that had just happened. But Zhang Yiqing asked me about his skills. Did I want to become his disciple? Upon hearing this, I was completely stunned. Master Zhang's skills are extraordinary. Of course I would be willing. If you're willing, quickly bow 3 times to your master. After the bows, there's still other things to do. After paying respects to the master, he took out the jade token from Yang Duangong last night and said, "Now, you are a disciple under the heavenly master's manner. I will now erase Yang Duangong's name from the jade token. Then, I'll add your blood to it." As a drop of blood soaked into the jade token, a golden light instantly surged into my body. The jade token has successfully recognized its master. I officially became a Taoist of the heavenly master's manner. Qin Huai, look what time it is now. I saw it was just 3 o'clock. I hurried out to check the weather. It was actually starting to rain. But why was there only 1 drop of rain? I turned around and went back inside to ask Master Zhang what to do. But Master Zhang just told me to stay calm and not worry. After what felt like a long time, suddenly a torrential downpour started outside. In just a few minutes, the water rose to another step. I turned to look at the clock. It was exactly 4 o'clock. "Master, what should we do? Have I really lost?" As the words left my lips, Master Swan's voice came from outside. "Young man, wasn't I right?" In the end, it rained at 4 o'clock. As soon as Mr. Swan entered the room, I sensed something was wrong. It was raining heavily outside, yet there wasn't a single drop of water on him. Moreover, seeing Zhang Qing in the room, the man seemed visibly shocked. He immediately turned to me and said, "Since you've already lost, then hand over your soul." At the critical moment, Master Zhang shouted, "Hold on. Sir, if you win, we certainly won't go back on our word. But this time, you clearly lost." Hearing this, Mr. Calculator pointed outside and muttered, "Isn't this rain heavy enough? You dare still call yourself Mr. Calculator? Now that you're in big trouble, why don't you cast a divination for yourself?" The Imperial Edict clearly stated that it should rain at the 3rd hour. The rain hasn't stopped. River Dragon King, how dare you? You actually dare defy the Jade Emperor's decree. Even though Zhang Yiqing exposed him, he still doesn't regret his actions. He believes the Jade Emperor wouldn't punish him over such a trivial matter. After saying this, he disappeared with a whoosh into the heavy rain. I curiously asked Zhang Yiqing why he didn't stop the Dragon King. Was it because he was afraid of offending the Dragon Palace and had to swallow his anger? Upon hearing this, he gave a slight smile. There are countless rivers, lakes, and seas in this world. There are many kinds of Dragon Kings. He's just a small Dragon King of the Qintai River. But the one you met yesterday was far more powerful than this one. I expect he'll be back soon. His words had barely left his mouth when a sound came from outside. The Qintai River Dragon King had indeed returned. He was seen to kneel down with a thud. He prayed on the ground, asking Zhang Yiqing to save him. It turns out that he had just returned to the Dragon Palace not long ago, when he received the Jade Emperor's decree of punishment. Moreover, he was to be beheaded in public tomorrow at noon. That's why he was forced to find Zhang Yiqing, seeking a way out. Since that's the case, you should first fulfill your promise. You lost this bet. Just hand over the soul of the woman you've hidden. Upon hearing this, the River Dragon King dared not delay. He quickly released a soul from the document. As the soul gradually took human form, that soul was indeed Chi Yao. Now that Chi Yao's soul has been found, the immediate priority is to restore her soul. Seeing that Qi Yao's soul had already taken human form, Zhang Yiqing immediately began chanting a soul-calming incantation, accompanied by a flash of golden light. Qi Yao, whom I had been thinking of constantly, finally woke up. After saving Qi Yao, he Longwang cautiously approached and asked what he should do. There's a cave downstream in the Qingtai River. Inside, an old dragon king is enshrined. Divert the river water into the cave, and he will protect you. Aren't you going yet? If you don't, it will be too late and you'll really miss your chance. Upon hearing this, the dragon king of the river dashed out in a single leap. Seeing this, I asked Zhang Yiqing how. He knew the Jade Emperor was going to execute the river dragon king, because it was I who submitted the memorial requesting his execution. Since you, Qin Huai, have already sworn allegiance to me as my disciple, then I will give you a great gift. Come with me, both of you. After following Master Zhang to the Qingtai River bank, at the cave where the old Dragon King is enshrined, water was indeed flowing into the river continuously. Moments later, dragon roars came from beneath the water. The next second, a colossal dragon burst from the water and soared into the sky. Zhang Yiqing then led us towards the cave entrance. Qin Huai, watch carefully. This is the grand gift I've given you. He, once the esteemed Dragon King of the Western Sea, has been trapped and languishing in a dog hole for 1,000 years. Now, thanks to Zhang Yiqing and me, he has been rescued. The former Dragon King is finally able to see the light of day again. To repay me for saving his life, he actually recommended me to the Jade Emperor to become the new Dragon Lord of Qingtai River. Although I was shocked, I didn't refuse the old Dragon King's kindness. Just as I was about to push open the door to my house, Zhang Yiqing suddenly shouted, "Wait!" I noticed that a couplet had appeared at my doorstep, though I didn't know when. The first line, people come and go, human feelings are many. The second line, lonely souls and wandering ghosts, no one cares. The horizontal inscription, hell on earth. Seeing this, Zhang Yiqing joked, looks like we've got another big gift. Let me see how terrifying this hell on earth really is. He slowly opened the door, only to see hundreds of ghostly eyes instantly glaring at us. I almost peed my pants. My house had truly become a haunted house. Master Zhang closed the door and said to me, your house is now the underworld. It's only natural for ghosts to come to the underworld, so you can't force them to leave. It's said that the living eat hot meals, while the dead eat upside-down meals. Let's prepare the upside-down meal and send them off now. After Zhang Yiqing found Lu Guanguan in the village, he asked old Lu to prepare a pot of rice under the pretext of alchemy. He specifically instructed that there must be enough for 20 people. After the rice was steamed, he used 2 bowls, inverting them on top of each other. This is the so-called upside-down meal. After placing 20 portions of rice in front of my house, Zhang Yiqing shouted towards the room. I've set a bowl of rice for all the wandering souls, whether they have an owner or not. If you're not picky, take a bowl and be on your way. As soon as he finished speaking, the door to the room creaked open. The little ghosts inside also began to stir. Seeing this, the 3 of us quickly stepped back. The group of vengeful spirits and little ghosts rushed forward. They began to eagerly devour the rice. Qi Yao and I quickly tore down the couplet from the door. After getting the couplet, Zhang Yiqing then had Qi Yao and me used rice to paste it back up. The newly pasted couplet emitted a red glow. The words on it had also transformed into an exorcism incantation. Seeing this, we finally entered the house with peace of mind. Having recovered, I questioned Master with confusion. Who exactly wants me dead? How should we deal with the ghosts outside the door? Once the ghosts are full, they will leave on their own. We'll go check after daylight. Let's see who's bold enough to turn my disciples' home into a living hell. The next morning, Zhang Yiqing. Not long ago, he had seen the same characters from the couplet on a stone tablet in the back mountain. After a while of searching, Qi Yao finally found a half-broken stone tablet. Although it was only half, she could still clearly read the inscription, the Taoist who cannot be. According to Zhang Yiqing's deduction, this stone tablet was at least 200 years old. Upon hearing this, I was greatly shocked. Could it be that it was made by someone who lived? A 200-year-old monster is trying to harm me. To find out the truth, we plan to go to the Taoist temple 10 miles away and take a look. After a long journey, Qi Yao and I are starving. Zhang Yiqing knocks on someone's door to beg for food, but when the old woman inside sees that he's a Taoist priest, she slams the door shut. Seeing this scene, Zhang Yiqing seemed to understand something. He immediately knocked on the door of the second household. This time, he claimed to be a merchant, who was planning to visit the temple to offer incense and pray for blessings. Upon hearing this, the young girl looked serious. She advised him to forget about offering incense, because the temple on the mountain hadn't been showing signs for a long time. The villagers had developed a strong dislike for the Taoist priests. Now, that Taoist temple is dilapidated. Even the gods enshrined inside have been removed. After understanding the whole story, we continued towards the mountaintop. Finally, we arrived at this ineffective Taoist temple at dusk. But as soon as we stepped through the gate, a flash of lightning tore across the sky. Zhang Yiqing told us to stay close and not be afraid. Then, I asked into the empty hall, I wonder which heaven the esteemed Taoist within reveres. After a moment, a response truly came from within. This poor Taoist reveres the third watch, the fourth watch, the fifth watch, every watch of the night. I know you are the current celestial master of the celestial master's mansion. Your celestial master's mansion prides itself on its orthodoxy. How about tonight you and I compare our abilities in summoning immortals? At the third watch, I will summon an immortal here. If you dare to accept the challenge, please send someone over at the fourth watch. Upon hearing this, Zhang Yiqing readily accepted the match. He asked what would happen if he won. At this moment, the reclusive Taoist priest laughed uncontrollably. If you win, I will use the temple's treasured sword to cut off my head and give it to you. If you lose, then you will carry me into your heavenly master's mansion in a grand palanquin. You kneel down in public and acknowledge me as your master. Sure, it's a deal then. Zhang Yiqing, you do have some guts. But the immortal I invited is the pure young patriarch, Lu Dongbin. How could the immortal you invited dare to come? After agreeing to the bet with the old Taoist, Zhang Yiqing led me and Qi Yao down the mountain. He came to the gate of a grand house. He inquired about the recent situation of the household to the male owner. After some instruction, Zhang Yiqing frankly said that the stone lion in front of their house was blocking their fortune. If you want to change your luck, just do one thing for me. Someone will pass by here at 3 o'clock in the morning. Just help me pull him into your house. Good food and drink will suffice. We'll send him up at the fourth watch. Hearing this, the man readily agreed. He quickly took out his notebook and wrote down everything Zhang Yiqing said. After finishing the preparations, when we returned to the Taoist temple, we found that a portrait of Zhang Guolao was already displayed in the center of the hall. Moreover, a treasured sword was hanging above it. From Zhang Yiqing, I learned that Taoism is divided into two branches. One is the Heavenly Master sect, founded by Zhang Daoling. The other is the Chuanzhen sect, founded by Wang Chongyang. Although both follow the teachings of the Supreme Old Lord, they are different schools within the same faith. It is said that Wang Chongyang established Chuanzhen sect after meeting Lu Dongbin. This is why the Quanzhen sect venerates the pure young ancestor, Chang Dongbin, so much. Upon hearing this, I suddenly understood. And the time had just reached the third watch of the night. At this moment, a Taoist's voice suddenly echoed through the main hall. The auspicious time has arrived. We welcome ancestor Lu Dongbin into the Taoist temple. As the words landed, a gust of cold wind blew by. Yet there was not a single person at the door. The defiant Taoist priest waited another half hour. Still no one came. Zhang Yiqing smiled slightly. It's past 3 o'clock. Friend, you've lost. Qin Huai, you will personally behead him. How did you know I would lose? Your summoned gods may not necessarily come. Okay, then I'll let you see. It's past the fourth watch. I'll go greet Master Lu now. Zhang Yiqing then turned and walked towards the door. And the old Taoist priest, who had refused to show himself, finally revealed his true form. He was surprisingly a child of only about 10 years old. Just as Qi Yao and I were shocked, a figure suddenly appeared at the doorway. The next second, with a whoosh, he rushed into the Taoist temple. I directly entered the portrait of Lu Dongbin. Upon seeing this scene, the young Taoist was greatly shocked. He quickly composed himself and said, "This is all fate. I accept the bet and will lose gracefully. But do you really think you can defeat me? Qin Huai, go fetch that sword." I grabbed the treasured sword from the wall. As soon as it was drawn, a piercing cold air immediately rushed at me. Zhang Yiqing yelled, "Strike now." Without hesitation, I swung my blade at the Taoist's head. The head fell with a thud. But not a single drop of blood appeared on the ground. Seeing this, I quickly asked my master what to do. The matter isn't over yet. Explain yourself. The next second, the headless Taoist actually spoke. I will tell you everything. But please, throw my head down the mountain first. Even though I was scared, I still forced myself to remain calm. Quickly holding the head, I ran to the entrance of the temple. With a swoosh, I threw the head far away. Back in the main hall, Zhang Yiqing was asking if he was the unpossessed Taoist. But he said he was just a Taoist whose body had been taken over by the unpossessed Taoist. 100 years ago, a man used poisoned wine to kill him. Then he severed his head and took it for himself. Upon hearing this, Zhang Yiqing asked, "So, you're saying that my disciple was the one who put up the couplets at my door?" No. The previous body was beyond my control. I don't even know what it did. Upon hearing this, Zhang Yiqing immediately exposed him. You gambled your head with me because that head was no longer at peace in your heart. After chopping it off, you hastily discarded it. I guess the head gradually became uncontrollable by you. So you used my hand to get rid of it, right? You are the undaoist, the person who cannot follow the Tao. The headless Taoist chose to remain silent at this time. After a moment, he burst into laughter again. This new heavenly master Zhang has some skill. But what can you do to me? Of course I wouldn't dare do anything to you. But you should look behind you. In a second, the undaoist was stunned in place. Because pure young patriarch Lu Dongbin was staring intently at him. Seeing this, Dao Ren suddenly knelt down and begged for mercy. But Lu Dongbin didn't hesitate for a moment. With a bang, he pierced the man's body with golden light. After dealing with Qing Tu, Lu Dongbin turned and walked towards us. It seemed everything was within his expectations. After thanking Zhang Yiqing for the prepared wine, Lu Zhu, with a flash of golden light, disappeared without a trace. At this time, Zhang Yiqing, incomplete sentence, needs context for accurate translation. Find the head I just threw away, because he is still alive. After hearing this, I quickly ran down the mountain. I finally found the head in the grass. It was only a few seconds. The Taoist's face had already aged by decades. After bringing the head back to the Taoist temple and handing it to my master, Zhang Yiqing bowed deeply and apologized. The old Taoist priest said he didn't have long to live. Thanks to us, he escaped the control of the Wufadoran. Now, he only wishes for a proper burial after his death. He begged me to go to his former Taoist temple to find his already buried body, and he promised a great reward after the matter is completed. Hearing this, I looked up at Zhang Yiqing, seeking his advice, but he simply smiled slightly and told me to continue listening. I have been cultivating for 100 years, yet I have never accepted a disciple. Now, how should I handle this cultivation of mine? Young friend, do you want the true Qi in my mouth? In order to inherit the old Taoist's legacy, Qi Yao and I set off early the next morning, toward the Taoist temple where he lived during his lifetime, to search for his household register, which had been buried for 200 years. After a long journey, we finally arrived at the foot of the mountain, where the Taoist temple was located, but a small river without a bridge blocked our path. Just as I was at a loss, a small boat suddenly approached. From the boatman, we learned that the stone bridge over the river had been washed away by floods a few days ago. Now we could only cross the river by his boat. After getting on the small boat, the boatman asked if we were going to Baiyun Temple. He also asked if we would be coming back later. If we were coming back, we could continue using his boat to cross the river. Although this guy seemed very friendly, there was something a bit strange in his expression. I casually responded to him, and then Qi Yao and I continued walking up the mountain. We walked for half an hour on the mountain path. A figure dressed in Taoist robes suddenly appeared in front of us. Upon learning that we were heading to Baiyun Temple, the old man with a white beard claimed to be a Taoist from Baiyun Temple. He also said he was a junior of the old Taoist priest there. Last night, my senior brother appeared in my dream, and instructed me that someone would bring his head here. So, he specifically asked me to wait here for him. Upon hearing this, Qi Yao and I were both puzzled, because the old Taoist priest yesterday said that junior disciples would be waiting for us, but the white-bearded Taoist priest asked us to leave our heads with him for a good night's rest, to ensure nothing went wrong. I politely refused the white-bearded Taoist priest's offer, and immediately continued running towards Baiyun Temple. After much difficulty, I arrived at the cemetery in the back mountains of Baiyun Temple. Qi Yao and I were stumped, because there were actually two unmarked graves here. One was a Taoist-style tomb made of stacked stones. The other was an unremarkable commoner's grave. Moreover, the stone tomb looked considerably newer than the commoner's grave. After careful consideration, I resolutely chose to open the commoner's grave. Qi Yao stood to the side, keeping watch. With a determined heart, I pushed open the coffin lid and discovered inside was indeed a headless corpse. Just as Qi Yao and I were congratulating ourselves on finding the right grave, a series of animalistic cries suddenly came from inside the coffin, and that headless corpse actually stood up. A pair of eyes, emitting a faint glow, appeared behind the corpse. The next second, it shot out. Qi Yao and I were both thoroughly scared by this scene. After regaining our composure, we realized it was a highly intelligent yellow weasel. It let out an evil chuckle at us, saying, "Little brother, do I look like a human or a celestial being?" Luckily, Qi Yao reminded me not to respond. Seeing my unwillingness to answer, the yellow weasel didn't press further. It simply left with a parting remark, "I'll find you again," and disappeared without a trace. Seeing this, I quickly retrieved Taoist Li's head, and placed it in the wooden coffin, burying it with his body. After more than 200 years of death, he miraculously came back to life. After understanding everything that had just happened, Taoist Li muttered, "If the yellow weasel asks you whether I look like a human or like an immortal, just tell it I look like an immortal." That might be of unexpected help to me. After helping the Taoist priest up, he said his life was nearing its end. His current spirited appearance was merely a death rattle. Having said that, he suddenly grabbed my head. He prepared to transmit the true Qi in his mouth to me. Before I could react, the strong true Qi from his mouth gushed out. It directly entered my body through my mouth. Immediately, a powerful force filled my meridians. Is this the result of over 200 years of cultivation? This feeling is so incredible. After thanking Master Li for his gift, he instructed me to absolutely not mention that he had passed his true energy to me. Before I could understand the meaning of this, a group of people who looked like Taoist priests approached from behind. "Senior brother, I haven't seen you in 100 years. How are you? I know your time is running out, so I've brought a young disciple for you. In that case, please pass your true energy on to him, senior brother." After saying this, the young Taoist was about to step forward to receive the inheritance. Upon hearing these words, Taoist Li immediately released a powerful internal force in response. Junior brother, how do you find my energy? Are you in such a hurry to take away my cultivation? Look at Taoist Li, he's full of confidence. Even the old man with the white beard didn't dare to act recklessly. He could only follow his advice. Tomorrow morning, he'll offer up his cultivation. As for me and Qi Yao, we were described by the Taoist as villagers helping him return to his roots. Although the old man with the white beard was temporarily subdued by the Taoist, he was still filled with suspicion. He kept testing Li throughout the journey. Did the Taoist master transmit his inner energy to an outsider? He also insisted that Qi Yao and I stay overnight at the Taoist temple. After settling in temporarily, we were thinking about how to escape. Suddenly, a gentle knocking came from outside the window. Opening the window, we saw it was the yellow weasel from before. The yellow weasel stood on the ground and asked impatiently, "Little brother, do I look like a human or a celestial being?" "I think you look like a celestial being." Upon hearing this, the ferret spirit prostrated itself before me, thanking me for the bestowal. The next second, a foul stench erupted from its body. After the smoke cleared, I found a yellow-haired boy standing before me. "Benefactor, don't be alarmed. I'm here to save you," accompanied by a strong stench emanating from the boy's body. We, Renai, took advantage of the guard's collapse and quickly escaped. We ran blindly to a small river without a bridge. Just as I was considering how to cross the river, the small boat appeared before my eyes again. "Why haven't you left yet after all this time? Could it be that you're deliberately waiting for us?" Although he insisted on saying he would take us across the river, I am full of suspicion towards this person. Seeing us at a standstill, caught in a dilemma, that yellow-haired kid suddenly called out to the surroundings. Hundreds of yellow weasels emerged from the forest. At the command of the yellow-haired kid, the weasels all rushed toward the small river. One by one, they bit onto each other, forming a weasel bridge. Seeing this, I didn't hesitate. After thanking the yellow-haired kid, I immediately led Qi Yao onto the bridge. But the next moment, a violent wave rose behind the boatman, almost tearing apart the Huan Pizi bridge. Although I knew there was something wrong with the boatman, I didn't expect him to try to kill me. Just as the small bridge was about to collapse, a voice from across the river suddenly called out to me. Qin Huai quickly grabbed and successfully caught the rope thrown down by his master. Qi Yao and I luckily made it back to the shore, and the yellow-headed boy on the opposite side, seeing me safe and sound, started jumping for joy. "Don't make a fuss. I'll make sure to properly entertain you next time we meet." After leaving the riverbank with Zhang Yiqing, he casually tossed over a set of clothes for Qi Yao and me to change into. He also said I'd definitely like Qi Yao's set of clothes. Amidst our laughter, he suddenly frowned. I murmured while looking in the direction of Baiguan. "The old Taoist has passed away." After saying that, he patted my shoulder and told me that I must seek justice for him in the future. When we got home, my master told me to hurry up and wash up. If nothing unexpected happens, the decree from the Jade Emperor will arrive soon. After tidying up, I remained by the window, waiting for the decree. Then, suddenly, a figure appeared before me. The man, with tattered clothes, was carrying a large stone on his back. He explained that there was a solitary grave on the mountain without a tombstone. That was why he was carrying the stone, intending to help set up a tombstone. But he didn't know the name of the person buried there. So he begged me to come up with a name for the deceased. "I can't help you. You should leave quickly." Seeing that I wasn't willing to help, the man stopped pressing the issue. He immediately lifted the stone tablet and continued walking up the mountain. Just as I was wondering, Zhang Yiqing arrived after hearing the sound. After learning that I had encountered a strange person, he explained that these people are called nameless. They have no names of their own, but like to borrow others' names. Once a name is borrowed by them, even luck and fate will be taken over by the nameless for their own use. While Qi Yao was still worried about whether my luck had been borrowed, a wave of black smoke suddenly surged in from outside the door. The visitor was none other than the Qin Taihe god. Qin Huai received the decree. Just as everyone was immersed in the joy of the enfeoffment, Zhang Yiqing suddenly began telling me the legend of the Nameless clan. It is said that the Nameless clan first appeared during the Qin dynasty. They would steal others' names to seize their luck. Once, a general from the Qin dynasty had his name stolen. Then, he pit-killed a full 400,000 soldiers. The souls of these 400,000 gathered in the deep pit, generating immense resentment. And this also happened to create an excellent cultivation environment for the Wuming clan. But they had long been annihilated by Qin Shi Huang. I never imagined they would appear in my home today. Hearing this, a wave of fear washed over me. It's a good thing I didn't tell the nameless man my name. Then Zhang Yiqing suddenly asked me if I felt icy cold all over, because my name had already been borrowed by that nameless man, and he also took away a part of my soul. The reason I didn't feel anything unusual is because I was just appointed Dragon King by the Jade Emperor. So I have dragon energy behind me, protecting my soul. When the nameless man planted the tombstone engraved with my name into the ground, my life went into the graveyard along with that tombstone. Hearing this almost made me pee my pants. I clearly didn't reveal my name just now. Yet, he still used my name. Who is trying to harm me? Could it be the Taoist priest from Baiyun Temple? Xiao Huai, aren't you forgetting someone? The ferryman who ferried us across the river. I guess he must be someone extraordinary. He's very likely also a disciple of the Taoist school. The most urgent task right now is to erase your name from the tombstone. Let's go. We'll go meet that unknown person right now. After following Zhang Yiqing to the back mountain, the tombstone with my name was indeed stuck into the ground. I was just about to go home and smash the tombstone with a sledgehammer. But Zhang Yiqing asked me to look at the back of the tombstone first, if I wanted to live. Meet in town tomorrow night at the third watch. Zhang Yiqing explained that nameless ghosts most like to place tombstones in places with heavy yin energy. So many people die before they even find the tombstone. Although I found the tombstone, my chances of survival are still slim. Because the price demanded by nameless people is usually very high. That general from the Qin dynasty was executed in a trap. It was only after the Zhao army lost 40 commanders that they managed to save a life from their hands. Look at me, feeling down, but Zhang Yiqing gives a bright smile. Don't be afraid. You still don't trust your master. Now, you are already the Dragon King of the Qin Tai River. Right now, there are some matters in the river that need you to handle. Remember to uphold justice and enforce the law impartially. Otherwise, even Master won't be able to protect you. Master, don't worry. I will keep your words in mind. When Qi Yao and I arrived at the Qin Tai River, we found that, besides an old man fishing by the bank, there was no one else. Just as we were about to go downstream to take a look, the old fisherman suddenly turned his head and said, "It's fate that we've met, little brother. Gun, don't you want to chat with me?" His words successfully caught the attention of this newly appointed Dragon King, me. After chatting with the old man for a while, he said he was fishing here in the middle of the night to ask for my help, but I'm already in a desperate situation. Seeing my reluctance, the old man, once the matter is settled, there will be a great reward. He also arranged to meet me here the night after tomorrow. When I got home, my mind was full of the mysterious person stealing my soul. It was a struggle to get through to the next day. Finally, Zhang Yiqing appeared. He was ready to take me to meet the mysterious person. After arriving in town, there was still some time before midnight. We found a tea house and waited for Wu Ming to arrive, accompanied by a clear bell chime. Wu Ming, dressed in ragged clothes, appeared as expected. As soon as we met, I questioned him about why he tried to harm me, but he shamelessly said it was just a fair trade. Meeting me was simply my fate. As long as I helped him complete a small task, he would return my soul. Hearing this almost made me faint from anger. It was clearly your plot that stole my soul. Now it's become my bad luck, and I still have to find a way to redeem it. Zhang Yiqing then directly asked about his conditions. My Wu Ming clan's actions are based on fairness and justice. We always leave a way out for others. But thousands of years ago, because of a senseless disaster, we were almost annihilated. Today, the request I'm making of this young man, it would be like moving mountains and seas in a single day. If you can move the mountain where the tombstone is located into the sea, then I will return your soul and spirit. Hearing this, I was immediately at a loss. Not to mention how difficult it would be to move a whole mountain. But we don't even have a sea team here. At this moment, Zhang Yiqing suddenly stood up and said, "All right, I promised you on behalf of Qin Huai." After receiving a response, the mysterious person smiled faintly. He told me to come back here at midnight tomorrow to keep the appointment. If the task is completed, he will return my soul. As soon as the mysterious person left, Xiao couldn't wait to ask Zhang Yiqing if there was any solution. Can something like moving mountains and seas really be done? I learned from my master's words. The nameless clan's actions are always unpredictable. If he wants you to live, he might ask you to fetch him a fish. If he wants you dead, he'll, just like he did, have you slaughter 400,000 soldiers. To move mountains and command the seas isn't difficult. The old fisherman by the Qin Tai River could do it. Having said that, he turned and left, telling me to seek the old man's instruction tomorrow. As soon as we returned to the village, we found every household is decorated festively and joyfully. It's as if they're celebrating a festival. The village head beat the gong and announced, the statue will enter the village tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. He also demanded that all villagers must participate in the welcoming ceremony. This was to fulfill the request made by the anonymous person. The next evening, Qi Yao and I went to the Qin Tai River bank and found the old fisherman, because my master said only he could help me. After understanding my intention, the old man immediately told me to send Qi Yao to him as payment. Upon hearing this, I immediately protected Qi Yao. I was furious. The old man is delusional. I then walked towards home. Seeing my reluctance, he suddenly spoke again. He began praising how strong our bond is. As for the matter of asking for someone, it can wait for later. I only need to do him a small favor. As for the details of this matter, I'll be told after it's done. To save my life, I had no choice but to agree to the old man. I took him to the mountain behind my tombstone. I asked him in confusion how one could move mountains and seas, but he said that moving mountains was impossible. However, he could bring the sea to me. Having said that, he took out 3 yellow dragon flags. He muttered, "Now, bring me a sea to sea. Aren't these 3 flags for summoning rain? This mountain is at least 50 meters high. How much rain would you need? And how would you deal with so much rainwater afterwards?" Hearing this, the old man explained. When Yu the Great controlled the floods, he obtained 3 treasures. They are the river map, the mountain opening seal, and the water avoidance sword. Once the rain submerges this mountain, he can use the water avoidance sword to divert the rain. But now, there's only 1 more hour until midnight. I fear 3 flags won't be enough, because each flag can only borrow rain from 1 Dragon King. This setup may require the 4 Dragon Kings must borrow rain at the same time to complete it. Now the arrow is on the string, it must be released, so he can only give it a try. Hearing this, I immediately cupped my hands in thanks. If this attempt fails, I will always remember your kindness in my heart. Then let's begin. Follow me to another peak. The old man planted the yellow flag and sat down on the ground. For Dragon Kings, if you hear me, respond quickly. As the old man chanted the incantation again and again, the originally clear sky was suddenly filled with lightning and thunder. The South Sea Dragon King has arrived. With the help of the 2 Dragon Kings, the seawater quickly submerged halfway up the mountain. But the 3rd watch is almost upon us. The North Sea Dragon King and the East Sea Dragon King still hadn't appeared. Then, a dark figure in the distance walked toward me step by step. It was the nameless person who came to take my soul. The time was approaching midnight, the time I had agreed to meet with the nameless person. But the water had only reached halfway up the mountain. The old man who helped me pray for rain comforted me not to be pessimistic. Maybe there's still a glimmer of hope. At this moment, the nameless person let out an evil laugh. There's 1 minute left. I see that mountain isn't going to be submerged. The appointed time has passed, but the mountain still has a peak remaining above the water. It seems I've really lost this time. Seeing my gloomy expression, the nameless person actually comforted me, saying that all this is fate. My soul is destined not to belong to myself. After saying that, he turned around and prepared to leave. At this moment, the old man who had been praying for rain suddenly stood up and called out to the nameless one, who said Qin Huai lost. The bet you made was clearly about moving mountains and seas, but there was no requirement for the sea to submerge the mountain peaks. So this time, Qin Huai won. I've also heard of your nameless clan. Although the methods you use to exchange souls with others are quite ruthless, but the focus is on integrity. If you break your vow, you will surely be despised by your people. I'm not wrong, am I? Hearing this, the nameless man was left speechless. With an angry grunt, he returned it to you. As my soul returned to my body, my spirit also returned to normal. Seeing the nameless man about to leave, I immediately called out to him. I asked who wanted to harm me. But he only said, I can't tell you, and then disappeared. After thanking the old gentleman for saving my life, he reminded me that I still had a task to do for him. It had to do with the new statue our village had just acquired. That is, to help him settle a case involving this statue. Watching the old man's back, I increasingly felt he was no ordinary person. Back home, Zhang Yiqing had been waiting for me for a long time. He came specifically to remind me about the statue entering the village tomorrow. He told me to be sure not to kneel before the statue. A Taoist priest will come to the village tomorrow. He will officiate the ceremony and I should advise him to leave. The last thing is that if the statue falls and breaks, no one should blame it. After giving the instructions, he stood up and left. He reminded me not to forget these 3 things. That night, I had a strange dream. In the dream, a woman with a distorted face begged me to save her. The next day, I woke up with a dizziness in my head. Just as I was about to eat, the village chief came to tell me to attend the village's idol ceremony. After arriving at the ancestral hall, I was about to ask what deity the village chief had invited, when suddenly, Wang Er ran in and shouted, "Something's happened to the village head. Someone died at the ancestral hall." Upon hearing this, the village head hurried to the ancestral hall to check the situation. I, however, planned to first see the Taoist priest the village had invited. After arriving at the house where the Taoist priest was staying, I advised him to return immediately. This is the will of the 3 pure ones. But the old Taoist priest said that life and death are predetermined by fate. Some things are better left unsaid for now. Let me go with him to the ancestral hall and see for myself. A woman from an outside village was found hanged in the side hall. Seeing this scene sent a chill down my spine, because the woman's appearance was identical to the person who begged me for help in my dream last night. The villagers were furious, believing someone had disturbed the village's feng shui. A Taoist priest who came to oversee the statue of the deity in the village. I suggest we put the body down first. But the crowd, which had been so lively just moments ago, fell silent. Everyone claimed to have something to do and didn't want to come forward. Seeing this, the village headmaster called them all useless. Then he turned to me and told me to take the body down. He even thoughtfully prepared a white cloth for me beforehand. But Zhang Yiqing specifically instructed me never to touch the body. Thinking of this, I could only say, I didn't dare and quickly dragged Qi out to escape the scene. After observing from a distance for a moment, it was finally Taoist Wang who personally took down the corpse. After handling the corpse, the idol-worshipping ceremony proceeded as usual, accompanied by Taoist Wang burning incense and praying for blessings. The villagers all knelt down to worship the idol in the ancestral hall. Only I quietly hid behind and squatted without kneeling, because Master had told me yesterday not to kneel before the idol. The summoning ritual is complete. Master Wang said to me, "Little brother, I see you're also a Taoist. If something happens to me, please help me with my affairs." "Master Wang, do you know you're going to die? Then why don't you hide instead of presiding over the ritual?" Hearing this, he turned around. Some things cannot be avoided. Someone must bear the consequences. This righteous energy in the world needs someone to uphold it. I couldn't forget Master Wang's back for a long time. So I decided to enter the ancestral hall to investigate. To investigate just how powerful this statue is. I saw a three-headed, five-armed figure standing in the center of the ancestral hall. It looked exactly like Neza. But why is this Neza missing an arm? Just as I was filled with doubt, the weather outside suddenly changed. A bolt of lightning struck the village. Seeing this, I quickly called Chi Yao, and rushed towards the village chief's house. Sure enough, the village chief's house was already filled with black smoke. I rushed forward and pushed open the door to see Master Wang struck dead by the lightning. I knew inviting the deity to the village would be a life or death gamble. But what exactly was the righteous energy that Taoist priest Ku guarded within himself? Looking at Taoist priest Wang's body, I couldn't calm myself for a long time. But the onlookers said he must have done something wicked that violated heaven's will, so he was struck down by heaven. They all moved far away from the Taoist priest's body, not daring to approach. As I was alone preparing the Taoist priest for burial, Zhang Yiqing suddenly patted my shoulder, and handed me a clean Taoist robe. After changing into the Taoist robe for Taoist Wang, we followed Taoist customs and placed the body on the bamboo raft, letting it return to nature with the flow of the river and the sea. From Zhang Yiqing, we learned that Taoist Wang had blocked the heavenly punishment for someone. If he hadn't caught the heavenly lightning, it would have struck our entire village. This was because the statue the village chief brought in had a problem. As everyone knows, when inviting a deity, you must have a complete statue of the god. But the statue in our village is missing one of its arms. That's why we offended the statue itself and the heavens. Now, our whole village is going to be punished. Also, the woman who hanged herself in the ancestral hall has a complicated identity. When I heard this, I immediately connected Neza with the Dragon Palace. Could this be related to the Dragon Palace? I need to find out the origin of the statue. Zhang Yiqing and I went to the village chief to inquire about the situation. Nai Chang explained that the statue was invited from Wang Fuzi in the town. A few days ago, seeing that Zhang Yiqing was not around, he had asked Taoist Wang to come over. Upon hearing this, Zhang Yiqing immediately instructed him to shut the ancestral hall doors for 7 days. And during these 7 days, it's best to eat vegetarian and burn incense. He said that and then left the village chief's house with me and Chi Yao. After we went outside, Zhang Yiqing asked us if we felt that something was off with the village chief. Most people know that Nwang is a man of great power, but he specifically invited someone with less power, a man with 3 heads and 5 arms. Then when we arrived at Wang Luzi's house in the town, I was even more surprised, because Wang Luzi is actually in the coffin business. A coffin shop with a deity statue. What exactly is the village chief planning? After chatting for a while, Zhang Yiqing did not ask about the statue. He only inquired if there were any coffins made from swamp cypress wood here. Upon hearing this, Wang Liuzi's expression suddenly grew tense. This swamp cypress wood has been used by emperors throughout history. Even if such coffins exist, ordinary people can't afford them. Seeing that he was impatient and trying to send us away, Zhang Yiqing shouted loudly, "Was that gloomy wood coffin comfortable to sleep in?" After Zhang Yiqing exposed his secret in one sentence, Wang Luzi instantly froze in place, cursing Zhang Yiqing for talking nonsense and ordering him to leave immediately. But Zhang Yiqing told him to look down at his own belt. Wang Luzi looked down, and saw that his red belt, which he had worn for 3 years, had faded. At this time, Zhang Yiqing pointed out again, the dark wood coffin he was sleeping in had been tampered with, and whoever tampered with it didn't want him to live. Hearing this, Wang Liuma quickly ushered us into the house. After sending his daughter, who was writing an essay in the living room, away, he suddenly knelt down with a thud. He begged Zhang Yiqing to save him. 3 years ago, a man suddenly found Wang Liuma, and said his lifespan was over and a grim reaper would soon claim his life. That night, Wang Liuzi really saw the black and white impermanence. Luckily, the man helped him send them away. He was saved by a Yin official, which is how he escaped disaster. In order to live a few more years and raise his daughter, Wang Liuzi always obeyed the master's instructions. He slept in a coffin made of Yin wood, and wore a belt soaked in black dog blood for protection. The man helped Wang Liuzi extend his life in the human world, and he helped his master craft a statue. Upon hearing this, Zhang Yiqing murmured, "Actually, your lifespan ran out about 6 months ago, but he found you 3 years ago. Your master has been using you. He made you lie in the coffin for 3 years, absorbing the Yin energy. Then, when your life ended, he used your body to mold that statue. You're already a living dead. Tonight, a ghost will come to claim your soul, and you've also committed the crime of deception. You'll be cast into the hell of boiling oil, unable to reincarnate for eternity." Hearing this, the man turned his head to look at his daughter, who was still doing her homework. The reason he refused to die was to take care of his daughter. Wang Luzi, you're already dead. If you stay here any longer, your daughter. The yin energy around her continues to permeate her body. I'm afraid she doesn't have long to live. If you cooperate fully and help me find your master, I can help you petition the underworld to give you 7 days to settle your daughter's affairs. At this moment, Wang Liumo finally understood. He stammered that his master lived in the nearby Wangjia village. And Wangjia village was the very village where Wang Po lived. We arrived at Wangjia village at 3 a.m. Under Wang Liumo's lead. We came to a dilapidated courtyard. No one answered after we knocked. Zhang Yiqing shouted and barged in. As soon as we entered the courtyard, a wave of cold air hit us. Wang Liumo, you're so bold. You actually dared to deceive us. The person beside us had a look of terror, as if he didn't understand what was happening. Following Zhang Yiqing's finger, we looked in that direction. Dozens of hanging black cats were glaring at us. It was as if they wanted our lives. Zhang Yiqing bent down and sniffed the scent on the ground. He told us not to approach. Someone has hidden a ground evil here. As soon as he finished speaking, a cold wind blew past. Several ugly-looking earth demons suddenly appeared before them. The lead earth demon roared and charged at Zhang Yiqing, but it was instantly dispelled by a slap from Zhang Yiqing. How dare these puny earth demons appear near me? Get lost. Upon hearing this, the other earth demons immediately weakened. With a swoosh, they all vanished without a trace. Wang Fuzi, who was standing nearby, was about to explain but was interrupted by Zhang Yiqing. Because the dead black cats were swaying in the wind, and their eyes, glowing blue, were wide open. Then, a series of pitiful cat cries echoed through the night. These cats, they were all alive. A dead cat coming back to life is interesting. Qin Huai, take Qi Yao outside and wait for me. Since he wants to play, I'll play along with him. Following the master's advice, I went outside. A man's figure suddenly appeared in front of him, and he was the master of Wang Fuzi. When Wang Luzi questioned him about why he had deceived him, the man coldly said, "What use is a dead man to me? Just take a look at your belt." Hearing this, Wang Fuzi lowered his head and looked. To his shock, his stomach had already started to rot. "I'll fight you to the death." Having said that, Wang Liuzi grabbed his cane and charged at the man, but he fell down a step away from his enemy, and his body completely turned into a pool of blood. Seeing the man before me being so cruel, I angrily asked, "Why did you unjustly kill everyone in our village?" The man let out a loud laugh and said, "You say I'm doing this for no reason. Then why don't you take a few minutes to listen to a story I have to tell?" Decades ago, a severe drought struck Kinjayagu. The harvest was completely ruined, and people were so hungry they started gnawing on tree bark. After they finished the tree bark and wild vegetables, they started eating. A widow in the village who had a child. She became the villagers' first target. Upon learning this, the widow hid her child beforehand, but he was thrown into the pot by the villagers and turned into soup. You tell me, should the people of Kinjayagu die? Now, do you still dare to say I did this without reason? Whether someone lives or dies is not for you to decide. The king of hell has his own judgment on the death roll. Seeing Zhang Yiqing, the man was clearly a bit surprised. He didn't expect him to finish off the black cat so quickly. Knowing he was no match, he turned to leave. But Zhang Yiqing said that the situation in Kinjayagu wasn't at all as he had imagined. He suggested he listen to the rest of the story before leaving. What else do you know? That year, Kinjayagu did indeed suffer a natural disaster, but his mother was not harmed by the villagers. Upon hearing this, the man, furious, said he had witnessed all of this himself. Zhang Yiqing sneered and retorted, "You were only 2 years old then. Do you really remember those things clearly? If I'm not mistaken, don't you have many scales growing on your body, making your body constantly itch? Since you just told Qin Huai a story, now I'll tell you one too." One year, Kinjayagu suffered a flood that drowned many villagers, but the flood came so suddenly that even the Dragon Palace didn't know what was going on. So the Jade Emperor was furious and ordered the Dragon King to investigate the matter thoroughly. The Dragon Palace sent the Dragon King's third daughter to conduct the investigation. While visiting Kinjayagu, the Dragon Princess fell in love with a man named Xin Qingshan and gave birth to a son. However, the Dragon Princess's actions angered the Dragon King. As a result, the Dragon King ordered no rain to fall in Kinjayagu for 3 years. What you saw was the Dragon Palace. The palace made taking your mother away. In fact, the villagers of Kinjayagu never harmed your mother. You have scales but cannot transform into a dragon. That's because your father was immortal. Hearing this, the man was greatly shocked. If my mother was a dragon lady, does that mean she is still alive, right? Seeing the man's expectant expression, Zhang Yiqing said that she hadn't died before, but now she probably has. The man looked furious, angry at Zhang Yiqing's self-contradiction. Zhang Yiqing then turned to me and asked, about the woman who had hanged herself in the ancestral hall. Could it be that the woman who hanged herself was his mother? After bringing the man to the Qin Tai riverbank, I shouted out to the river, "River God, where are you?" The next moment, the river god carried the woman's body to the shore. Upon identification, it was confirmed that this was the man's mother. Seeing this, Zhang Yiqing explained, "Your mother was killed just a few days ago. If you want to know who killed her, you must follow Qin Huai to the Dragon Palace. It's also a good opportunity to test your swimming skills, and see if you are truly the son of the Dragon Maiden." Hearing I was going to the Dragon Palace, I was nervous. I quickly asked Zhang Yiqing if he would come with me. "Xiao Huai, you must remember, you are already the Dragon King now. There are many things you need to learn to face yourself." Hearing this, I also cheered myself up. Then I went towards the center of the river with the man. Under the guidance of the Qintai River God, it was the first time I witnessed the fish cart beneath the water, and I even rode it, speeding directly toward the gates of the Dragon Palace. After arriving at the Dragon Palace, the gatekeeping shrimp soldiers didn't recognize me as the Dragon King of the Qintai River. In the end, it was the river god who stepped in to explain and clear up the misunderstanding. Under the guidance of the shrimp soldiers, I finally entered the Dragon Palace. I met the famous Dragon King of the East Sea. Although the courtiers in the Dragon Palace were gossiping about me, but I still paid my respects to the Dragon King of the East Sea, and explained that my purpose in coming was to ask for his help in resolving a case, specifically, the death of the third princess of the Dragon Palace. Hearing this, the Dragon King's turtle minister, the Grand Chancellor, couldn't sit still. He burst into a furious tirade, saying I was angering the Dragon King. He ordered the shrimp soldiers and crab generals to arrest me. Seeing that I, little Qintai, the River Dragon King, is about to be overthrown in the Dragon Palace, I loudly questioned him, "Don't you want to know the cause of your daughter's death?" The East Sea Dragon King slammed the table and roared, "Qin, you dare!" At this sight, I was completely terrified. Offending the Dragon King here, I'll either die or be skinned alive. Just then, outside the Dragon Palace, a familiar voice suddenly appeared. It was the old fisherman who helped me move mountains and seas. Seeing the old man here in the East Sea, the Dragon King seemed somewhat apprehensive of him. Upon learning that this case was brought here by him for me to judge, the East Sea Dragon King was momentarily at a loss. When he heard that the old man was going to report him to the Jade Emperor, the Dragon King finally agreed to settle this case. After asking unrelated personnel to leave the Dragon Palace, I proceeded to interrogate the Dragon King of the East Sea in detail. It turns out that ever since discovering that the third princess was having an affair with a mortal, the Dragon King had sent someone to capture her and imprison her in the Dragon Palace. But the third princess had been spoiled by her mother since childhood and was very stubborn. She would rather die than sever ties with that mortal. In the end, in a fit of rage, the Dragon King stripped her of her dragon heritage, and even cut out her dragon heart. She was banished from the Dragon Palace. That's why the princess didn't transform into a dragon after her death. Hearing this, the princess's son was furious. He questioned him, saying he had harmed his own daughter. "What right do you, a bastard, have to speak to this king? All the questions have been asked. Minister Qin, I hope you won't push your luck." Having said this, I asked about Qin. "Is there any progress on the Jiago flood? Because hydrology has always been under the jurisdiction of the Dragon Palace. How could the Dragon Palace not know about the sudden flood in Kanjiagu?" But the Dragon King of the East Sea coldly threw down a sentence saying he didn't know and ignored it further. Things being as they are, I've decided to first ensure the safety of the three princesses. Then I'll sort out the clues and make other plans. At this time, the old fisherman nearby muttered, "Actually, the Kanjiagu flood case. He has been investigating it for decades. The flood back then was very strange. 80% of the people in Kanjiagu drowned, and I am one of the few survivors." I was shocked when I heard this. According to the timeline, my father would have been only 4 or 5 years old at the time. How could he have faced the flood alone? Seeing my confused expression, the old man reminded me, "My father is much more than I imagined. He's not just in his 40s or 50s like I thought." Hearing this, the mystery in my mind deepened. How many more secrets is my father hiding from me? After returning home, Chiao immediately came to check if I was hurt. Meanwhile, Zhang Yiqing asked me if I knew. "I don't know who controls the floods in this world." After thinking for a moment, I answered that it should be the 4 sea dragon kings and the water god. From Zhang Yiqing, I learned that the final authority over floods in the human world lies with the Jade Emperor. But regarding the case of Kanjiagu, the Jade Emperor ordered a strict investigation, which suggests that the flood likely did not pass through his hands. So it's very possible that it was the 4 sea dragon kings or the water god acting on their own. Having said that, he gave me 2 more pouches. He told me to open them after 2 things happened. To investigate which Dragon King secretly caused the rain. I planned to find survivors of the flood to understand the situation. I learned from Zhang Jufeng in the village that the flood 25 years ago was very strange. Most people were drowned before they even reacted. Only a few people climbed to the top of the mountain and escaped, and it was a giant turtle that ultimately rescued them. That bird turtle's shell was 5 or 6 meters long. Its whole body was bigger than 3 oxen. The few survivors were precisely those who managed to survive by getting onto the bird turtle's back. Hearing this, I quickly asked, were there any strange things that happened? After thinking for a moment, he suddenly spoke. Later, a strange man really did come to the village. He claimed to be the old turtle who had saved the villagers years ago. He even hoped the villagers would repay him, but everyone thought he was a fraud. They united and drove him out. I also learned something else from Zhang Jufu. I had actually moved to Kinjiagu, only after that flood. The old fisherman clearly said my father was also a survivor of that flood. What on earth is going on? Zhang Jufu said that the man who called himself Old Turtle came back to the village several times after that, but my father talked him out of it with a few words. After a moment's thought, I asked about what the man who called himself Old Turtle meant by requiting a kindness. But Zhang Jufu refused to tell me, no matter what. He said he promised my father he would keep it a secret. After our conversation yielded no results, Qi Yao and I left Zhang Jufu's house. I remember Zhang Yiqing said we had to wait until Yaba spoke and the river flowed backward before the satchel could be opened. So my top priority now is to find Yaba. Thinking back, I actually remember there being such a person in the village. After arriving at Yaba's house with Qi Yao, he was disheveled and reeked of filth. It seemed like he had been starving for a long time, digging through the leftover rice in his hands. Seeing him in such a pitiful state, Qi Yao decided to invite him to her home. Hearing this, the mute actually agreed. After returning home, she gave Yaba some clean clothes. Then Qi Yao made a feast to entertain him. At that moment, the sky suddenly flashed with lightning and thunder. Uncle Yaba actually said it was going to rain heavily soon. Zhang Yiqing's prediction really came true. Seeing the disbelief on my face, Uncle chuckled and said, "When did I ever say I couldn't speak? There was a reason I didn't speak for decades. The villagers all thought I was a fool. That's why I didn't want to talk to them. This little girl cooked so many dishes to entertain me. I definitely can't pretend I didn't hear or see anything anymore." After being treated to good food and wine by the old man, I hesitantly asked him if he had experienced that flood. The old man nodded slightly and said to me, "Kid, are you trying to find out who caused that flood? I advise you not to get involved in this matter. Otherwise, even if you're the Dragon King of Qintai River, you won't be safe." I was greatly shocked when I heard this. I have never revealed my Dragon King identity to anyone.